Commissioner Bernardo?
Here.
Commissioner Brennan?
Here.
Commissioner Crawley?
Present.
Commissioner Paravano?
Here.
President Mateusz?
Here. Right, at the present time, do we have any public comments that have not submitted a speaker comment for items not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to our consent calendar. I have had requests to pull items 1, 2, 3, and 4. So do we have a motion to accept items 5 and 6 on consent?
Mr. President, I'd like to remove item number 5.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve item 6?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. So item 1, bills and claims in the amount of $175,008.19. So there's some comment on that.
Yes, I asked to have this pulled. Just wanted to comment that I did review the district's bills and invoices today. And just wanted to say that the staff has been doing a really great job keeping all of that in order. And did want to mention again that I believe that the staff is working on doing a comparative of our PG&E, water bills, garbage, utilities in general, like a 5-year type of comparison, so we can see how those rates are fluctuating. I've noticed some really drastic differences with our water bills recently, which were interesting, especially because of some of the issues we've had with that. And that's it.
Mr. President, I have reviewed the bills and claims for the period ending February 17th, 2016. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the bills and claims in a total of $175,008.19.
And I'll second our treasurer's motion.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Okay, item 2, meetings of the minute from January 6, 2016. Comments, please.
President Mateusz, if I may, just in case it alleviates the need for any comments. As I look at how we've been reporting these out, I can recognize that there is confusion sometimes in how the votes are recorded. It's very clear, for example, on item number 2 in the minutes, that the board calendar was approved 5-0, motion by Commissioner Brennan, seconded by Commissioner Ciancarelli. It's less clear, for example, in item 3, that it was approved 3-0, in parens Brennan Paravano, then in parens Corrali Bernardo abstain. It's less, it would appear on the surface that there's a miscount, when in fact what it means is that Commissioner Brennan made the motion, Commissioner Paravano seconded that motion, and with Commissioners Ciancarelli and Bernardo abstaining, the motion passed on a 3-0. What was not recorded then, obviously, was the vote of you, President Mateusz. In the future going forward, we will reformat this so that the motion to, for example, approve the minutes of special meeting September 2nd is detailed with motion and maker and second, and then the vote will be recorded after that. So that may alleviate any confusion about how the minutes are recorded in the future.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Crawley.
So thank you for that clarification, Steve, because I did bring this up in an email to him and spoke with the general manager today, and I appreciate that that's going to be more clear, because I had an issue with one of the items that is being reconsidered or is on the agenda tonight, but anything to make the minutes clear would be greatly appreciated. So I would move to accept this item, to approve the minutes from January 6, 2016.
I'll second.
I asked to have this pulled.
Oh,
So I have some questions. So I appreciate that, because I've noticed that too, and would hope that the staff would amend these minutes to make that correction on these minutes, not just the minutes going forward. Is that what you said you were going to do?
I hadn't intended, certainly we can do that. If you don't want to approve these minutes tonight, you can bring them back. They'll have the same net effect, but the motions and second would be clearer. But what I had intended was that we would just go forward with a new formatting.
Well, I have some other changes,
Okay.
but I think if we're going to change the minutes, it would be good to get that corrected, because looking at this, honestly, it's very confusing as to who made the motion, who seconded, and whatnot. So I think we should make sure that our minutes are clear for the public record later. But the concerns I have are on the first page to start, where it says, under item B, these members of the public all expressed concerns that the harbor was not listening to Commissioner Brennan's item on extreme flooding that is taking place at Oyster Point Marina. I think that's not very clear. I think it should, a simple change would be next to harbor, just put in the word commission, harbor commission, and then under where it says item, it should say agenda item, so it's clear what item we're talking about. So that's just a very minimal change there. And then on page 5, which is the third page of the minutes, item 11, one inconsistency that I've noticed is in some cases we include a very short description of what the public comments were related to. Like on item B, what I just read you was a description of public comment. But on item 11, it just says public comments and then it says informational. It doesn't give you any idea of what the comment was. And in this case, to summarize those two comments, it was that those two public members voiced concern about the election process. It wasn't just informational, they voiced a concern. So I'd like to have the minutes amended to reflect the public comment consistently. And hopefully we can do that going forward too. So those are just minor changes.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there a friendly amendment to amend the motion to approve the minutes to reflect these changes?
I'd like to ask to have those changes made as an amendment to the motion.
I think those changes can easily be made right now instead of having to have the minutes redone, for us to have to come back and revisit the minutes.
Commissioner Brennan was requesting that the format change that I was suggesting at the beginning of public comment
Right,
on this
and you
would
said
be
that moving-
implemented on all of these.
Right, and you said moving forward.
And I said moving forward, so we can either,
Well, could you make all those changes without us having to bring it back? Because I
yes.
don't need
I
it
can-
Yeah.
brought
Yes, I
back.
can do that for the record, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
I can do that for the record, and they will appear as amended, very good, on the website.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay? Good.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Okay, item 3, repair of fish fire building roof. Authorize general manager to execute a contract with Andy's Roofing for $27,700 for repair of the roof of the fish fire building. There's a request to pull this item. So may we have discussion on this item?
So the reason I asked to have the item pulled was I just wanted to better understand. I mean, I know what size the building is, and it's smaller than, the roof is smaller than the roof on my house. And I know how much the roof on my house costs, so I'm thinking I probably don't realize the extent of the work that needs to be done. So I was wondering if we could get a report.
We have a staff report, please.
Right, well, what we did, of course, is we took those two required bids. I believe this project had two, we received two bids on this project. You have to keep in mind that there are particular requirements for public contract bidding, daily wages, bonds, and that often those same things that protect public monies and protect the public often also cost more for those folks that bid on them. So that might be the explanation as to why this seems high compared to your household bill. Otherwise, I'm not really sure how else to answer the question.
I can address it's a flat roof. It involves tear off of existing roof and then a flat roof, which is like a built-up layered thing with a lot of flashings around the edges. I don't know your house, Commissioner Brennan. I would assume it was a pitched roof with composition shingles, which is a much less expensive roof to build, to place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other further comments on item 3? If not, may we have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 3, authorize the general manager to execute contract with Danny Roofing for $27,700 for the repair of the Fish Buyers building.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Parravano?
Aye.
President Mateo?
Aye. Okay, item 4, asphalt slurry seal at Oyster Point Marina Park. Authorize the general manager to execute the attached agreement with Sunrise Grading and Paving Incorporated for the asphalt slurry seal at Oyster Point Marina Park in the amount of $56,758 and establish a 10% contingency of $5,676. We did have a request to pull that. I do have a public comment. So let's start with our public comment, and then we'll see what we have in the way of commissioner comments.
John Ullum, thanks for having me up here. Looking at your idea for slurry sealing, just a little bit of research shows why you might have considered it. Apparently, you can use slurry sealing for surface water infiltration, which is the big issue that would be out there at Oyster Point. The water getting down into the dump. Apple crashed. But what they did specify is when not to use it. And you don't use slurry seal when there are ruts, when there are potholes, when you have a lot of bumps, or you have a lot of alligator cracking, which pretty much describes most of the parking lot that you have out there at Oyster Point. So you're proposing to do something that the experts tell you is not worth doing. Because you didn't include the contract in the packet or any kind of staff report, I don't really know what it is that you are going to slurry seal. Maybe you are going to slurry seal parts of the lot, then it makes sense to do that. But if this is, as I suspect, an attempt to address the flooding issues, the ponding issues that they have out at Oyster Point, this is just not going to do it. And it's just a Band-Aid at most. It's a feel-good solution. It's a total waste of public funds. And you need to do your job, ask a few questions as to why we are doing this, what good it does anybody, and then vote accordingly. Thank you.
Commissioner comments.
So I asked to have this item pulled, and I did have a chance to talk with the general manager about it today, and that helped answer some of my questions. My concern with this is, you know, it's about $57,000, and a fair portion of the area that we're going to be slurry sealing does go underwater on a fairly regular basis with, you know, high tide and king tide. And from my understanding, the most likely remedy to the flooding problem is going to be bringing in fill and raising the height of the landfill. When fill is brought in the areas that are currently flooding, then essentially all of that area with asphalt is going to need to be replaced. So it seems to me that we really ought to wait until the end of the month and find out more about what the water board is going to be recommending as mitigation for the flooding, before we spend money on coating an area that may have to be essentially replaced to address the chronic flooding problem. So it just feels like the timing on this is not good, and I would be more comfortable if we at least waited to get a clear report from the water board on what it is they're going to be recommending as mitigation. I don't like the idea of throwing money at trying to fix or prolong something, fix something that may have to be essentially buried over in fill and then rebuilt at some point. Now, it could be that that project, if it happens, takes, a year or two. I don't really have any idea at this point, but I think we're so close to getting feedback from the water board, it would make sense to hear from them before we move forward with this sort of a maintenance project. And the feedback I've gotten from speaking with somebody at the water board is they told me they thought it made sense to hold off until they made some sort of a determination there. So I'm not really comfortable with this, although Steve did say that, well, I should let you speak for yourself. Why don't you respond?
Well, there's a couple of things. I did ask staff to look into the amount of coverage that would take place. It's about 8.5% of the project. To address Mr. Ullum, the project is for the trail alongside the edge of the marina, not any of the parking lot. Okay.
So there is parking area, but and I believe the 8.5% refers to 8.5% of the trail. Is that right, Jim?
Yes.
So if I
Yeah,
may,
please.
So the project isn't just a slurry seal. So there's a gravel parking lot, which we're bringing in gravel to resurface that and recompact. So that's completely separate from the slurry, but that's in the project. So that's part of the 57,000. Also, we're reslurring our launch ramp area and the egress side of the launch ramp area. So when the boats haul out, they're dripping salt water off, and that degrades the asphalt. The same thing happens at Pillar Point. So they're going to have to slurry theirs here probably in the next year. So that's all part of this main project. The part that Commissioner Brennan is speaking about, that part of the trail, there's 2,500 linear feet. I pasted off the other day with a wheel. About 210 feet of that would be affected with king tide events, which happen maybe on the outside 7 times a year, and they're always in the winter. Our king tides are in the winter. So this project isn't going to come into effect until the spring. So it should have no effect on overfilling. So basically, you would hold the project up for about 210 feet of public trail, and it's degrading pretty bad. And what the commission needs to do is they need to decide whether public safety is more important than a little bit of flooding.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, if you have a question.
I have a question about the gravel parking lot. It seems to me, I'm just using common sense, I guess, that it wouldn't necessarily be a good idea to have a gravel parking lot on top of a landfill cap. Have we checked with the water board to see, because when I did speak with them out on the site, they told me it was better to have an asphalt parking lot than a gravel parking lot. So I'm also curious about what the story with that is.
I don't know the whole story. I know that Jim knows better than I. My understanding is that at one point we did have a plan to pave that section of the parking lot. We got as far as a spec and a bid.
Actually,
maybe Jim, you could jump in on this.
When they did the ferry terminal, when the ferry terminal was built, all the equipment was there. They raised the ferry terminal area up 2 feet. They brought in fill, they compacted it and raised it up. During that time, I got a quote to pave that area of the parking lot. It wasn't accepted at that time by our general manager and our commission, so it never got paved. That's the only part of the park that isn't paved. there's parts in the west basin that, the parking lot that are in really, really bad shape that need work, and, you know, that's for another discussion. But that area's never been paved, and just through attrition and through using it, it gets potholes and stuff like that. So all this would be doing is bringing in some more gravel, tearing it up and re-rolling it just to keep the drainage going in the right direction. It's all sheet drains, so that's all that is. It's
Was that parking lot, was that put in place when the ferry terminal was?
no, it's always been there.
So there's always been a gravel parking lot?
That's correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure when that,
Yeah.
that was put there. And is it used primarily
All
by?
tenants.
Because
All
the tenants are down in the other area.
That is the other area. So the ferry terminal goes from dock 11
Uh-huh,
to the west, and that gravel parking lot goes from dock 11 to the east.
so it's mostly tenants.
It's all
Where
tenants.
are the people parking that use the ferry? Because I know
In the
that,
ferry parking area.
Which
It's
is?
designated.
which is,
That paved area right below our warehouse.
oh, off to the side of the warehouse there?
No, just right below the warehouse, so in front of the ferry terminal.
Huh.
There's
Okay.
that paved area there.
I can
That's-
picture the big parking lot that doesn't get a lot of use, but I can't picture the other one.
So the area where we had the Christmas festival,
Mm-hmm.
that's all belongs to the ferry. That's
Right.
ferry parking.
It's right there.
Right in front of the terminal?
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Chang Crawley.
So just for the benefit of the members of the public, thank you very much, Jim Merlot, who is the harbor master for Oyster Point. And I think that you're absolutely right on. So I would like to make a motion to approve item 4.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Carabano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Okay, item 5, request for reduction of event fees for athletic event permit for USA Productions LLC for April 17, 2016 triathlon at Pillar Point Harbor. We have a request to pull this item, and may I have some commissioner comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I did pull this item. I wanted to do a follow-up on this item. I believe last year at our March 4th of 2015 meeting, we had the same, we discussed and approved the same agenda item from the same applicant. And at the time of the discussion with the applicant, when the commission was deciding whether to waive the fee or not, the athletic event fee, I had in the motion that made it contingent upon the fact that we were going to waive the fee payable to the Harbor District, but instead the applicant was going to be paying the fee as a donation to the Coastside Boys and Girls Club to support their marine education programs. And I'm just wondering, as a follow-up, whether that was actually followed through.
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid, Commissioner Paravano, but it is on my list, and I will make that phone call to the promoter tomorrow.
I'm here on behalf of the race director, Ryan.
Oh.
That fee was paid as one of the girls.
Great.
No, I work for it.
Okay. Good deal. Thank you. That answers my question. So, with that response, I'd like to make a motion that we approve item number 5.
I do have a comment, though.
I have comments too.
Oh,
But I'll second it to get the discussion going.
okay.
So, can I ask a question? So, Steve McGrath, just a quick question about the what is the Harbor District's notification process? Because I know that these events are scheduled way in advance. As a runner, I know that running events are scheduled pretty far in advance. So what is our notification process for things like this? Where
Notification to us of the
to
events?
both, but yeah.
Melanie, can you speak to what the special event policy requires?
I think it's just 2
Six.
weeks or 6 weeks. No, it's 2 weeks.
It would appear our special event policy
Look it up.
I think there's a differentiation between the small events and large events. I've got to believe it's at least 30 days, but I don't know the specific answer. I can get that for you, Commissioner Ciancarelli. But events like this will come to us a lot sooner than that, even outside of our requested window, because they've got a lot to plan.
I think they
Right.
first contacted us in, I'll have to look back, but I think January,
Okay.
beginning of January.
So
I
they,
believe, but
sounds
I'll
like they
look back.
contacted us about 4 months out.
Okay. Great, thanks. But that'd be good to know what the special events policy is.
I believe it's on our, I know it's on our website.
Yeah, I'll look at that. But I mean, I know that there's like the Half Moon Bay Marathon and other events too, the Pumpkin Run. I mean, I doubt that they've got the same issues, but there are those events. Thanks.
Commissioner Brennan.
I was just hoping, since we have someone who works with the event organizer, if they could tell us a little bit about the event. And then I had a question about something that happened at an event, I think last year, and I'm not sure if it was this event or a different event. So I don't know much about this event. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Could you stand up here? Would that be okay?
Yeah, no problem. My name's Eric Shetmer. Ryan, who's the race director, hired me on full-time this year. I managed a smaller portion of the event last year, which was a bike course, which basically was a swim that goes in and out of Pillar Point Harbor, a run along the coast, and the bike course runs south, God, I want to say 10, 15 miles, and then loops back. Upwards of 1,000 participants. It all happens pretty early in the morning. Roads tend to clear by 9 or 10. I'm not sure what other specifics you're...
Well, I know there was a triathlon, I'm not sure if it was this one, where there was an accident, I think, with the swimming part. Some people got hurt on a sharp object, and I think the Harbor Patrol was gonna try to find that object and remove it. Does anybody know anything about what happened with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. It might have been, it's possible it was a different event, and I know if John Draper was here, he would remember. He's the harbor master
Yeah.
for Pillar Point Harbor. But there is a swim portion?
Yeah.
And is that, do you know what part of the harbor the swim portion is in?
You know what? I don't offhand. I have a map of the event right there, which would probably help out. Mind if I look at it real quick?
Yeah?
Okay. Again, I was working on the bike course last year, so...
While the map is being retrieved, our event policy states applications should be received 21 days in advance.
Okay. So 3 months. Yeah, 3 months.
21 days, 3 weeks.
Oh, 21 days, sorry, 3 weeks, sorry, yeah.
This is going to be easier for me to show you than to describe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's a couple different courses.
Okay, so this is pretty much, I think, a similar course as last year. So that's the boat launch ramp right there. So I think that is probably where, that's the area where this sharp object was located. And I couldn't tell you if that object got found or not.
Okay.
But I would just encourage you guys to make sure that people are as careful as they can be, because it is a fishing harbor, and
Yeah.
so there is junk in the harbor. And the other thing too is there are water quality issues in that area. That area is usually got signage up with warnings about water pollution, which is
Okay.
kind of a chronic problem over there. So you might also want to make sure that your people
Participants.
are aware of that problem, and that they take whatever necessary precautions. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows those things
Okay.
up front, because obviously safety is really important. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure if you guys work with the Harbor Patrol, they'll do everything they can to make it a safe event.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was all I had. Thank you.
Okay. I will bring up one more thing in regards to the donation to the Boys and Girls Club. Ryan wanted me to ask if that was something you guys would consider again this year with the fee and discussion.
I certainly like to continue that support. I think it's very noble of Ryan to be able to do that.
Okay.
But that's a different agenda item, right?
I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we
So-
can discuss that out
Yeah.
of the blue off the floor.
Okay.
So should we add this on to the, what do you think, Steve Miller? I mean, has to do with the funds.
Well,
I think
the
it should
way
go
I
on a
approached
different
this,
agenda.
when the application came across my desk for the fee waiver request, was to look at it, and we are blessed with a very good event policy that is very clear about the size of events. And so it's clear to me that this was a for-profit enterprise running what we call an athletic event so the fees were $11,800. And I had a very good and congenial and productive conversation with Ryan, the promoter, where he made the case very effectively that when he put his business model together for this year's event, he had not anticipated an $11,800 fee. And so we agreed to come together to the commission with a split the difference and an idea that next year the fee would be paid in full. I was looking at this as opposed, for example, to the next event that is on your agenda for this evening, in which staff is supporting a waiver for the Coastside Fishing Foundation, a nonprofit that is, in fact, completely coastal dependent. And so the one part in our policies that isn't clear is what guidance to provide staff or the commission on waiver of fees. And absent that, I applied a simple filter of for-profit versus non-profit, and then coastal dependent versus non-coastal dependent.
Okay.
I think it makes it very clean and very clear about what future applicants can expect as well. So certainly it's within the commission's discretion to do what you wish. I defer to council as to whether a request like that is
I
considered part
would feel
of this.
more comfortable moving it to another agenda, just because of what we're dealing with enterprise and non-enterprise, nonprofit,
Well, and I think that's
for-profit
certainly
issues.
a consideration.
Right.
We are charged with developing the enterprise side of the house.
Right.
And a for-profit enterprise is paying fees to us is clearly an enterprise function. And so that's why staff looked at it very objectively in this manner. Again, the next item
Right.
is very clearly related to our core mission, and so in that instance, staff supports a waiver.
I have a couple
I
more
think I would
comments.
also comment that if you have 1,000 people paying $90 apiece, perhaps the organization would choose to match what they're paying the Harbor District and simply give that on your own, because there's a lot of money to pay for a for-profit organization. And we do have to cover certain basic fundamental expenses here. And there is a lot of Harbor District involvement with personnel, traffic control. There's a lot of things that go in, that we have real solid expenses here. So I would make the request that you guys think about whether you just simply match the amount and take it out of the proceeds from the race.
Okay.
And,
Commissioner Brennan.
okay, thank you. So, couple things. I think last time this came up, we got maps included in our staff report. And I think it's really important to have the maps. That's not something that's something the staff could have done. So that we can see exactly where the event is being held on our property. And
So we put that on the website, Commissioner.
okay, that'd be great. And I think that we really, when we're having these types of events where people are swimming in the harbor, because of the water quality warnings, I mean, it's a concern, and, it's on the county's website that there's a health advisory to not get in the harbor water swimming. We really need to think about that, and I'm not sure what the solution is. But that is something, I would love to see people swimming out there if it was safe. But when I do see parents with children swimming, I usually stop and tell them, you probably didn't see the warning sign, but this water's not safe to swim in. So it's something that we should think about and make sure that people are informed so that they're, I don't know what kind of waiver they sign or whatnot. But, I would not want to swim in that water, and I would want to know that it was contaminated up front. And sometimes you don't always see the signage, so not everybody realizes what's going on with the water quality issues there.
I think what might be terrific, Commissioner Brennan, is if we approached County Environmental Health and got them to come and do a brief presentation to the commission about the difference between a health advisory and a beach closure.
Right, and there are warning signs along that beach,
Right.
almost all the time.
Right.
So that safety aspect is important to me. And then also, if we could get a update from our harbor master on what happened with that sharp object. I'd like to make sure that got taken out of the harbor, because that was really unfortunate that those athletes were injured. And then the last thing is just that this is a health and fitness event, and I think that's a really great thing for, I want to support all health and fitness types of events at both Oyster Point and Pillar Point. And, I know we've reduced the fee to $7,375 from what is it normally? So in our
11,008.
11,080. But to me, it still seems pretty high. So, I just wanted to put that out there, because this is an event that really does benefit the public, and it is a health and fitness event, and it's the kind of thing that brings good public relations to the Harbor District. So I'm very comfortable with reducing the fee.
Well, that's a one-time reduction.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Basically, I echo Commissioner Corrali's statement about being an enterprise district. I can understand waiving fees for nonprofits, but for companies that are for-profit, I would like to see fees levied definitely for events that will impact, as President Matoush said, staff, impacts to the harbor itself. So I'm all for not waiving fees.
Well, we'd be waiving this one, but in the. but-
Right,
We'll
I'm sorry.
reduce
I
We're
apologize.
reducing it,
Right.
yeah,
I want
reducing
to be clear, sorry. Correct. For future, going forward, to make sure that we adhere to the special events policy, so that when we do waive, it's for nonprofits, and, I would strongly urge that.
So just for the public, I'd like to be clear that we're not, what's being proposed here in this agenda item is not to waive the fee, but to reduce the fee.
Right.
Yes.
To approve a reduced fee. Right, we have a motion. We have a motion. We have a
We
second.
have a motion and a second.
And a second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, a roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
President Matoush?
Aye. On to item 6, special use permit for the Coastside Fishing Foundation.
This one was
Oh, we
already approved.
it. Okay. All right, now we're,
7.
okay, item 7, I believe that there was a staff comment on Grindy proclamation.
President Matoush, we have tried on several occasions, as is past practice, to recognize departing employees, as we did just most recently in this very room for Michelle Roloba. Scott Grindy could not make it this evening, so staff would just recommend that the commission approve the proclamation and waive the reading.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Geraldo?
Aye.
President Mateo?
Aye. Okay, item 8, committee review and assignments. So the last committee to be appointed was the Oyster Point Liaison Committee. There was a good deal of competition for some the appointments there. I was asked to contact the mayor of South San Francisco to vet a candidate, and I'm going to appoint myself and Sabrina Brennan on that committee. I have already cautioned that our committee rules and regulations say that if we're not working towards the goals of the project, the person can be replaced. Item 9, Policy 3.0, Standing Committees, review. Staff report?
Yes. President Matoush, this item was brought forward under the district policy of a commissioner being able to bring an item to the board for consideration or for future agendizing, and as has been past practice, I've placed a disclaimer on the front of the staff report saying that staff has not had time to review the item or analyze it, and but this was an item brought forward by Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. So, through the chair.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. So the reason why I wanted to agendize this evening was to discuss policy 3.0 regarding standing committees. I wanted to revisit it because I realized that other governing bodies at other harbors do not typically let members of the public chair the actual committee. The chairpersons are usually one of the elected commissioners. So keeping in line with this, I would like to propose a change in the policy, and that change would be to strike item 3B. And 3B basically says a member of the public can serve as chair if agreed to by both committee board members. So I would simply like to propose removing 3B.
I have a point of order. The agenda item that we had does not say what this item was about. It wasn't clear, and I did ask our general manager previous to tonight to clarify what this item was about because it wasn't clear in the wording of the agenda item. And I was told that it was simply an item put on the agenda because apparently no context was provided that would clarify it, that would request it be put on for a future agenda where we could have a discussion about the specifics of whatever it is that, I mean, now we know what you wanted to discuss. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because we do have a member of the public on one of our committees, only one that I'm aware of, and that member of the public isn't here tonight. And so the people who might have been interested in this item aren't aware of it because it was unclear what your issue was. I'm sorry, what Commissioner Bernardo's issue was with this. So I'm hoping that it could be brought back with a clearly descriptive agenda item so that members of the public who may want to be a member of the committee and may want to weigh in or may have an opinion and may want to weigh in would have the opportunity to do that. So that was my concern.
Commissioner Chang Crawley.
So I thought it was very clear as to why Commissioner Bernardo brought this back, which is basically to review, discuss, and in policy 3.0, which is the standing committee's policy for the board. What's not clear but was subsequently given to us was the actual amended policy that was put in place on January 6, 2016. What we have in our board packet is the pre-January 6th policy, which doesn't fully capture what was voted on, which were in my mind, three fundamental things, or three fundamental things. One is that public members can be voting members of a standing committee. Public members can be chairs of the standing committees. And the third would be the fact that if the commission wishes to put an item on the agenda for a committee, that item that the commission recommends to go back to a committee would be put on there. So that's what we will be, that's, I think, what Commissioner Bernardo wanted to discuss, which is not what we have, but was subsequently given to us.
Well, now I'm really confused.
It's not confusing. It's the current physical copies that we have is the pre-January 2000, January 6th policy.
Commissioner
Through the
Bernardo.
chair, thank you. I'm not going to speak for Commissioner Corrali because I'm okay with discussing her piece of this, but my piece of it really was just 3B. Again, it's just the sentence, a member of the public can serve as chair if agreed. I mean, my whole thing is philosophically, again, and I look to the Oxnard Harbor Commission, the Port of San Diego, the San Luis Harbor, where elected officials chair subcommittees, whether it's the Finance Committee, whether it's the Public Safety and Recreation Committee, but they are chaired by elected officials and not members of the public. That is at the sort of the focal point of my discussion.
Okay.
So I'm not going to speak for you. I mean,
That's okay.
I think you have something different.
And I
Well,
have-
it's the same, but also I
Okay.
want to just
Okay.
really
I have a
quick.
point of order, a point of order. The point of order is this. What we're discussing right now was not clearly agendized.
I thought it was.
It was not clearly
That's-
agendized. And so members of the public who might have wanted to chime in a public comment aren't here tonight because it
This-
wasn't clearly agendized. It was not clear to me, and that's why I had to contact Steve to ask what this item was about. And he said he didn't know. He thought that it was just an item to bring it back for an agenda going forward. That's what you told me.
I think I said I believe that it would address public participation on the committees.
That, no, you didn't
It's
tell me that.
very clear that it's to review, discuss, and amend policy 3.0.
But 3.0, it doesn't, you need to say what it is that you want to
The
amend.
standing committee, policy 3.0, standing committees.
But what specifically? That's too vague. No one knows what that means. It's like, what about it do you want to amend? I think we need to be clear about what it is we're doing when we just had this on the agenda like a few weeks ago.
I think Commissioner Bernardo was very clear. He wanted to discuss 3B.
But we weren't clear about that in the agenda, and so the public was not properly noticed.
They were publicly noticed when they received this out, when this was distributed to the public.
Well, it says right here, 3.0, standing committees review.
Review.
So right
To
now,
review
we're
the-
reviewing
Right.
policy 3.0.
But
So-
it should say what specific part of it we're reviewing.
It's the whole policy from what how I've read it.
And basically, I'm sorry, if I may, I mean, it sounds like we're discussing the whole policy because I have a piece of it, and it sounds like Commissioner Corrali has a totally
And I have
different
a
piece of it, and
Well, and I
I'm
actually
sorry.
have another concern, which is the Brown Act concern, because right now, this is considered a legislative body under Section 59542, I think, of the Brown Act. So if we're going to go forward with this and there's an application process, I think that the members of the public who want to apply should be, they should be notified in the application that this is a Brown Act committee, which is subject to Brown Act rules, and therefore they should be trained for Brown Act compliance. So there are lots of things that I've got a problem with, and the fact that they've got members who can vote, public members who can vote, public members who can chair, and quite frankly, public members who can constitute a quorum right now. And it's not, there's nowhere on the application process that says that these public members must be Brown Act trained. They don't have to be, but it's a liability to the Harbor District if they're not Brown Act trained. And my guess is that for as many years as this has been in has been in the policy, that this has been a policy?
I think this Brown Act conversation is.
I'm sorry,
Let's
sorry.
not interrupt somebody that's speaking now.
Yeah, I believe that this needs to be very clear. I don't think it's been clear the whole time this has been in a policy.
Point of order, there's nothing about the agenda item that says we're going to be discussing the Brown Act
This
in
is about the
relation to
policy
committees
review.
tonight.
It's about the
So
policy
I agree
review.
that we should talk about the Brown Act, but it hasn't been properly agendized.
It has
I
been.
don't mind talking about the Brown Act, and I think it's a good point. I'm not disagreeing with you, but it does need to be properly agendized.
Okay, Commissioner
President Mateusz,
Brennan.
if I might for a second, because the question really, the threshold question is whether this item was properly agendized and ripe for discussion. That seems to me to be a question really in my wheelhouse under the Brown Act, so if you wouldn't mind my chiming in for a moment.
Please.
So the purpose of the Brown Act's agenda requirement is to provide a brief, general discussion of the subject matter such that interested members of the public have an idea of what is being discussed so they know whether to come or not. There is no requirement that the specific action being contemplated be specified on the agenda. So it is my view that the title on the agenda, Policy 3.0 Standing Committees Review, is sufficient to alert the public that the policy is under review. So it's my opinion that the Brown Act would allow you to have the conversation you're having. Whether you want to have that conversation is another matter altogether. But so I'm limited my point just to whether the Brown Act is a threshold bar to the conversation, and I do not think it is.
So we can talk about,
Thank you.
we can talk about the Brown Act in detail in relation to committees?
In relation to this
You
item.
if you're talking about a desire to revise this particular policy, that seems to me to be within the ambit of the agenda description.
So can you talk to us then about Brown Act requirements for committees and clarify that?
Sure. So standing committees are subject to all requirements of the Brown Act. A standing committee is any committee that either meets on a regular basis set by the board or has a continuing subject matter jurisdiction. An example of a non-standing committee, for instance, would be the committee you impaneled as your general manager search committee, which had a limited subject matter and then ceased to exist once you'd hired a general manager. So that was not a standing committee. That was what's referred to as an advisory committee, or some people call it an ad hoc committee. The district standing committees that are the subject of this policy are all subject to all Brown Act requirements. As I understand Commissioner Corrali's point, is that she is suggesting that any member of that such a committee be educated on the Brown Act, and I'm all for everybody being educated about the Brown Act, whether or not they're on a committee, because, but there is no legal requirement under the Brown Act that folks receive such training, but it certainly seems like a good idea for someone serving on a committee subject to the Brown Act to understand the restrictions that apply, because any member of the public will have the same status as a member of that legislative body, and all rules applicable regarding serial meetings, for instance, public notice, will apply to any member of a committee, whether they are an elected official or a member of the public.
And can we legally require that the public receive Brown Act training?
No.
Interesting question.
There could be a policy that all members,
Certainly, there could be such a policy.
Right.
I think I'm not prepared to answer that. I mean, I have to think about that question and get back to you as to whether you could. Well, I'll put it this way. It seems to me that you have great discretion in determining how you impanel possible members of the public. And there'd be no, I think there's certainly no problem with requiring any member of the public who wants to be on a committee to obtain Brown Act training as a condition of membership. They could just choose not to get such training, and therefore they would not be considered as a member of the as a member of a committee.
Could we I know that in the past, there have been members of this board who have not, who've let their Brown Act training lapse. Could we require that everyone be up to date with their Brown Act training so that that impacted both the commissioners as well as the public member?
I
I mean, now we're
believe that-
going aside, we're going askew of the whole point of what we're talking about here, and we're drifting off into another topic about who's certified for what and approved for what.
But just to
Commissioner
finish-
Paravano, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two comments on this review on the policy of standing committees. One, I would, under section 4A, it says here, and I'm reading from the policy, each commissioner serving on the committee can select up to 2 public members to serve on the committee. I would like to see that change from 2 public members to 1 public member. And also under item number 6, under decorum, and I read from the report, if a commissioner assigned to a committee consistently works against the mission and goals of the committee, the board president will appoint a replacement commissioner to the committee. I would like to add in section B to item number 6, that if a public member assigned to a committee consistently works against the mission and goals of the committee, the board president has the option to remove that public member from the committee. And the reason I'm adding B is to be consistent with A. If we expect a commissioner to, if a commissioner works against the mission and goals of the committee, we should also expect that if a public member works against the mission and goals of the committee, that that person be removed. So it's a matter of consistency with members of the committee.
So,
I'm seeing 3 proposed changes to this.
well, I have another proposal.
Okay, Commissioner Chang Crawley.
My proposal would be to, at this time, not have members of the public on these committees. However, if we do have members of the public on these committees, I would propose that we make them non-voting members, and remember, they cannot be chair, in line with what Commissioner Bernardo was saying, and that they don't constitute a quorum of the committee.
Then what's the point of having a membership of the committee if you can't vote? That would seem to be pointless.
Because they would give public input.
Anyone-
That's my point. And anyone can give public input.
Anyone can give public input.
Right.
I
But-
think that the purpose of having the public involved is, first of all, we're a countywide district. We don't have opportunities for the public to get involved, like, for example, a city council would have a parks commission, a planning commission, various commissions that would be, where there would be public board members appointed by the city council people or the board of supervisors is another example. And we're all familiar with that. We've all been to planning commission meetings. We've all been to Parks and Rec commission meetings. Those meetings are run by public members. So it's not as if that's anything unusual. The purpose of having members of the public included in committees as members, as voting members, was to get greater public participation, also to spread out the work of the committee. One of the problems that we've had in the past, and I'm sharing this because I know some members are newer than others here, is actually getting harbor commissioners to participate on committees. And so the concept was, and I'm the person who drafted the policy initially, and actually I support Commissioner Paravano's change. I think that makes a lot of sense. But one of the purposes of including the public was to increase public participation and to help support the committees in the event that commissioners might have a busy day job and be working too hard with trying to make a living to get involved on committee level when they're busy with other commission work. And that's, you're always going to have some commissioners who are going to put in more time outside of meetings than others. That doesn't mean that they're better. It doesn't mean that they're more effective. It doesn't mean it's not to suggest anything negative about a commissioner who doesn't have the time to participate on that level. But what it does mean is that if you aren't able to make it, why not bring in the resources if there are really great people out there who have something to contribute? And in the case of our one public member who happens to be on the Finance Committee, he is the former assistant finance director at from Stanford University. And so he has brought to this district a level of knowledge and has contributed in a way that has been extremely useful. So it's a real opportunity for us to bring in people who are experts. It's not always going to be available. We're not always going to have those people willing to serve. But in this case, we have one person who's willing to serve at that level, and he has not been disruptive at all that I can think of at any of our meetings, and he's been really helpful. So I just don't see where the problem is. I think we're making too much out of this policy. If it's a problem and it's broken, then we need to fix it. But there haven't been any instances of any problem. We only have one public member on one committee. And honestly, I have had a really hard time getting commissioners to be willing to show up for committee meetings. The only active committee that I'm aware of right now is the Finance Committee, and Commissioner Mateusz and I and the one public member do show up regularly, and we've been thankful to have the staff help us. But we really have struggled to get some of these other committees off the ground, and our district is trying to do a lot right now. We have a lot on our plate, and we really need to get as many hands on deck as possible to try to tackle the workload, and these committees can help with that. And we have seen success. And we have been told, in the past by LAFCO that the Finance Committee was absolutely a requirement, that we had to have it. And Bud Ratz, who is the public member on the Finance Committee, met with Martha Poyotis. He was involved in those meetings. He understands what LAFCO wanted from that committee. He's committed to it, and he's not trying to be disruptive. No one's being disruptive on a committee level. I know when Commissioner Bernardo and I had a committee meeting of the Marketing Communications Committee, or whatever we call it, that committee meeting was very successful, and we put together a really useful list of, with the public who showed up, of ideas for a future website for the district. And I believe our staff is using that reference list today for making changes to our website, or coming up with a new website. And so, it might not be that these committees meet regularly, and I think that's not a problem. But when we do meet, to get that public participation piece going is so critical, because when we look back at the reports from these meetings, what we come away from it with is, hey, we had people from the Chamber of Commerce there. We had,
This is
realtors.
not a filibuster.
We had,
Could you wrap it up?
And they were not voting members of the public.
excuse me,
We can use this time to amend our policy, but please make your point here.
Well, President Mateusz, I am polite to you, and I'd appreciate it if you would do the same with me and be polite. So I don't appreciate the filibuster comment and the yelling. It's not necessary. So I'm just trying to remind the board why committees are important, and sitting here and picking apart committees is not a productive thing to do. What we ought to be doing is meeting with our committees and working and doing the people's business. That's why we were elected, that's why we were appointed, and that's why we're here to serve. So I feel that this is a destructive activity. I understand some of the concerns. I'm not necessarily opposed to the suggestion that Commissioner Bernardo's making, and I actually really like the suggestion that Commissioner Paravano's making. But to block the public from participating as members of these committees, I think is very unfortunate, and I can't support that. So,
Well,
Well, as a summary, there's nothing stopping the public from attending these meetings, just to put that out there. So whether you're a member, you can, or not, you can still attend
and make
committee
public
meetings.
comment. And make public comment.
And make public comment.
So can I,
Could we get on with Commissioner Bernardo's request to retain or strike item B? Could we get a motion on your 3B?
So here would be my motion, and if I will look to my colleagues to amend it if necessary, but based on all of the discussion, what I'm hearing in terms of amending is, I move that we, okay, on policy 3.0, policy of standing committees, I move that we, one, remove item 3B, which says a member of the public can serve as chair if agreed by both committee board members. Strike that. And number two, add Commissioner Paravano's 6B, which is if a public member assigned to a committee consistently works against the mission and goals of the committee, the board president will appoint a replacement commissioner to the committee. Did I capture everything? I don't know.
Yes.
There were a couple of other specific questions, Commissioner Bernardo. Commissioner Paravano, on 4A, each commissioner can select up to one public member.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, and number three was the 4A, instead of each commissioner serving on a committee can select up to 2 public members, it would be 1 public member to serve on the committee. Sorry, so that would be the third. And there's
and
more?
what about the Brown Act?
Okay.
If I could for a minute, this is why I hope that, with your direction, we can come back and give it a thorough review. I mean, there's places where there may or may not be things to wordsmith or work out. For example, each commissioner can select a public member, but the chair does the appointments. I mean, I think we just have to, if we could get it all down and bring it back and come up with a much
Tighter
better
policy.
Policy for you as a
Yes.
proceeding.
So the motion might read to make these changes, direct staff to bring it back. It could even be as a consent item for you to review. There was also Commissioner Corrali on
The Brown Act.
7H, which was the quorum issue.
Oh, the quorum, yeah, but I also had something under 4, if we proceed with public members on the committee, I would have, under 4B, I would put a number 4, which would say all members of the public appointed to a committee must undergo Brown Act training.
including commissioners.
Either, yeah, that's fine with me.
There is no official.
So.
I think, and this is why I think Glenn's point is important. What we could do in bringing this back is define what Brown Act training means. Is it a CSDA webinar? Is it, a cup of coffee with district council? I think we've got, there's no certification process like there is for the ethics training.
Well, yeah.
Or the.
Step form
harassment
700
training or
even,
something
yeah.
like that. We can certainly bring it.
I'd like to suggest, though, that we have a public Brown Act training where the board gets Brown Act training along with the public, and we should probably do that once a year at a publicly noticed regular meeting.
That'd be
So
great.
I think-
Get a presentation on Brown Act, absolutely.
Most
Do it for many clients.
most
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
agencies do that.
Terrific idea.
I think
Terrific
that
idea,
would-
and we can certainly follow up with that. Maybe make that every January or early February. Certainly I'm hearing a desire to see something about Brown Act put in this policy.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. Okay, so just to, in the, looking at the clock here, this is really a more discussion than I had anticipated for this item. So in the spirit of moving this forward, I would withdraw my original motion based on all of these comments. And instead of tabling it, because I hate that word because it means like it's never ending, tabling something, I would move that staff review this and edit this and
Based on our
based on
concerns.
our comments, and then add it as a consent item at the next meeting?
The
Can
early
do.
March meeting, Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
I'm not looking
I
at you,
don't
I'm
know
looking
if
at
you
looking in the
will,
mirror.
I don't
Because
wanna-
otherwise, then we're tabling it. It's just going to go on and
Well,
on.
it could be brought back to next month and just give them more time, because they're
Okay.
working on other committees too.
Okay,
So
so
that would be the
at an
second
upcoming
March.
meeting.
I'd like to specifically request that it come back to a meeting in Half Moon Bay where we get a bigger turnout of public. We happen to have a number of people here tonight, which is unusual, and I think, for convenience purposes, it really ought to be at a meeting in Half Moon Bay, since it's about committees that the public is interested in following.
We have public members here, so
Right.
They're
my
all
question
from
is, will we have enough, will staff
Bay.
have enough
Not all of
time?
them.
Most
Will
of them.
staff have enough time to even prioritize this? Because I know we've got beach replenishment committee meeting coming up, and we have public safety at some point coming up, so,
Manager's items.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm happy
Um,
either way, but I just want to make sure staff isn't overburdened with something like this and has
I'll
time
commit
enough to
Bringing
take.
it back to a co-site meeting as soon as possible.
Okay.
Could we also get that calendar of committee meetings we were supposed to get? We still haven't gotten the calendar of when the committee meetings are supposed to be.
It's
Right.
been decided yet.
Okay.
Well, if that's going to be as
Who's
soon as
deciding?
possible, Steve, then the policy in place as of January 6th is in, I'm sorry, the policy adopted as of January 6th is in place.
Until such time as it's amended, that's the policy that's in place.
Right. Yeah, I'm not the chair, I'm not chair.
Yeah, I was doing fine till somebody mentioned that this item can only be heard at Half Moon Bay. Yeah, this district represents 2 marinas and 2 harbors,
That's right.
Yep.
Coastside and South City. The idea that we are loading favorite agenda items in one facility really bothers me. The district is open to having especially a policy review at either facility. So I would ask that this item come back for consideration at the earliest time that's convenient for staff to put together a report.
Well, I would just.
I agree with that.
I would like to comment that there has been a tradition at this district that precedes our current general manager, where items specifically related to commercial fishing have been agendized in South San Francisco to discourage public participation. And that is not the kind of transparency and the kind of process we should be promoting. I believe that we should encourage the public to attend meetings that are relevant. And I think that what's happening here is there's some people on this board that don't want to discuss committees in Half Moon Bay. And I would remind everyone here that we work for the public.
I agree, and the public is the entire county.
Let's figure
So,
out,
do we
we're
have a
gonna
motion?
bring this back
As
shortly
early as possible.
in a revised form for discussion, review, and approval.
Do we need a
Okay,
motion
we
for
get a
that?
motion to that effect, then it's that, I think we go back to possibly Commissioner Bernardo's revised motion, that staff review and amend and bring back at, I think you said the earliest
yes.
possible meeting.
Yes,
Period.
Yes.
and I'll
That's-
second that.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Moving on to item 10, I'm going to recuse myself and turn the chair over to Commissioner Chang Corrali for discussion of item 10. I'll let you
Okay.
title, read, and
Mr. President, I will follow you. I will recuse myself from this item.
So, and we still have a quorum.
Correct.
So the subject at hand is, for item 10, is the crab season closure and impacts on local crab fishing community. And I would love to hear your comments, if you'd like to start the discussion, Steve McGraw, our general manager.
Thank you, Vice President Giancarelli. It's not lost on anybody the fact that the crab season has closed. It never opened, in fact, and the crab market here resulted in $8.5 million of crab through the Johnson Pier in the last season, of which 89% occurred prior to January the 1st. I think it's clear that while the state and the feds wrestle with the idea of a disaster, an economic disaster has already occurred to our local community. Our local fleet, which in the 13-14 season, the most recent season for which I could find good numbers on the DFW website, landed 2.3 million pounds worth $7.7 million, which placed us fourth in the state behind San Francisco, Crescent City, and Bodega Bay. We know also that the status of the crab season is a moving target, and that the recreational crab fishery was opened a week ago Friday. Actions the commission, the district has taken to date: we have sent, per commission direction, letters to Representative Jackie Spear and the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors expressing our support for the local crab industry. We've extended the no-cost storage of crab pots in the upper parking lot through to the end of February, with the possibility of a further extension. 43 commercial fishermen have paid the deposit to store crab pots there, to be refunded on removal. As a point of clarification, we do not charge for that crab pot storage. What we do is we charge a deposit to ensure that the area is cleaned up sufficiently when the crab pots are removed. And if the area is sufficiently cleaned up, we return that deposit. We've waived late fees and the initiation of actions against crab fishermen late in payment of slip fees. Currently, 10 eligible tenants are 30 days, 5 at 60 days, and 5 at 90 days past due. These are the tenants that were tenants in good standing as of October 31st, the day immediately prior to the closure of the non-opening of the crab season. And we have provided no-cost use of district facilities for the Small Business Administration to conduct interviews for disaster-related low-interest loans. We know, and the letter is attached to the staff report, that Governor Brown has sent a letter to the Department of Commerce, the Secretary of the Department of Commerce, requesting that a fishery resource disaster be declared, and that this would make the community eligible for some federal assistance. We also know that, however, should that federal assistance occur, it's 18 months to 2 years out. Staff has also reviewed the actions of other harbors in California, and I did mention earlier that we were fourth behind San Francisco, Crescent City, and Bodega Bay. Two of those harbors are harbors that have taken action to waive fees, both Bodega Bay for a 1-month waiver and San Francisco for a 3-month waiver. And I'm abbreviating the terms and conditions around those waivers for the sake of simplicity.
Point of order, isn't there one other harbor that's not too far up that has a 3-month? I heard that today. There's 2 now with 3 months.
I would stand corrected if that is the case.
Okay.
It's not one that I've heard, and maybe a member of the community, fishing community here, could elucidate.
Bodega Bay got their 1 month in February.
Yeah.
What they did is they got a pot of money, so they gave all the crab fishermen and the salmon fishermen the month of February. They still had enough money in the pot to pay for March, so the crab fishermen are getting a March free rent also. And they're still working on whether they'll continue it down that road.
Thank you for that clarification. So if that clarifies the actions for.
So Bodega Bay is 3 months now.
Bodega Bay is effectively 3 months.
They're on their way to. There's also some clarification on San Francisco.
Please.
San Francisco also gave the crab fishermen 3 months of rent.
Would you mind coming up to the podium and introducing yourself? Thank you.
And thank
As I
you
see
for-
Steve swing the camera.
And thanks for giving us the extra
Sure.
information.
My name's Jim Anderson. I have a boat in the harbor and I'm a commercial crabber. San Francisco got 3 months slip fees for their crab fishermen. They've also, the crab fishermen that have, they have stalls inside of buildings where they store their crab gear. And so the port has waived their 3 months of pay, their dues or their fees for storage. Also, they also decided to look at the fish processor buyers, and the fish processor buyers that were doing over 100,000 pounds of crab a year are getting 3 months free rent also. So that's what they've also done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, so what staff is asking this commission to consider is a waiver of a month's worth of fees for our local fleet without breaking it down exactly by the 39 fishermen in the harbor with crab permits. We know that the smallest slip rent is $273 a month. The highest slip rent is $567 a month, and for qualified commercial fishermen, there's a 15% reduction available. That means that if we applied to get at the lowest end of the economic cost of the district, if we applied the 1 month waiver and all 39 were within the smallest slips and all 39 were receiving the 15% discount, there'd be a total impact to the district of $9,048. The high end, if all 39 were renting the largest slips at $567 a month and none were getting the 15% discount, the potential impact would be $22,113. So should the commission elect to do this, we will gather the data, we will receive the applications, and the range would not be any less than $9,000 and no more than $22,000. I think it is important to mention, as Mr. Anderson did, that San Francisco is making consideration for processors, and there are certain ripple effects of the closure throughout our community, and the commission should consider or be prepared to consider at a point in the future whether there would be consideration extended to others who may have been affected directly, as in the charter boats, or indirectly, for example, the restaurants, although I know that, I think that it's important that if the commission does elect to do this, that this apply to resident boats, not fee waivers for visitors, that there are potentially, and I don't know this to be true, fishermen who might have a permit but no history of fishing. I think it's important that that waiver be applied to somebody who's been actively fishing that permit. And that this waiver be applicable only to fishermen in good standing as of a date certain, and that if the federal disaster relief does come through in the form of cash grants, that even though it might be 2 years out, that on receipt of those cash grants, that the recipients of any fee waiver be required to make the district whole. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, I recognize Porter McHenry and Jim Anderson and others in the audience.
Can I
Great,
ask
thank
just a
you.
clarifying question
Sure.
before public comment, based on the staff report? How is it that we will be qualifying whether the fishermen are active or not? What is the process for checking to make sure?
There are a number of processes in here that we haven't clarified yet that we would on direction from the commission, but it would be a record of landings during a certain period.
Fuel receipts?
Landings of crab, I would suggest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tie it to the actual object. Okay, I'd like to open it up for public discussion. We do have a member of the public, Dan Blick. Please, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dan Blick. I live in Moss Beach, and I just wanted to speak out in favor of the waiver for slip fees for the fishermen. I think slip fees are a major source of revenue for the Harbor District, and so much of that revenue has come from the fisheries. I think that the least that the Harbor District can do is to do a 1-month waiver, just because I talk to the fishermen on a regular basis. They have been absolutely devastated, I'm sure, as you know. So I think this helps to keep the fishermen in the game and help to sustain them the way they have sustained the harbor for many years. I'll end there because I hope this is a no-brainer, and I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, open it up for commissioner comments?
Yeah, I have
Sabrina?
comments, but if you want to, okay.
I'll go after you.
So one thing that I'm really concerned about is I'm afraid that we might lose some of our local fishing businesses, and our commercial fishing families have been so devastated that I'm concerned that we may actually lose some of those businesses. And honestly, we don't have that many, and fishing is what attracts people to Pillar Point Harbor. So it really, it does more than just generate, commercial fishing, of course, generates revenue for the county. There's business there when the fishery's good. And recreational fishing also is good for the local economy. So both commercial and recreational fishing are very important to San Mateo County's economy. And we have good tenants and good, strong local fishing businesses, but this has been so bad. It's really worrisome that our fishing fleet may not survive it. So I'm pretty concerned about it. And if we did lose a lot of those businesses, that would be devastating for tourism. So I think, it's such a complex problem that we really do need to take action to try to alleviate some of the financial hardship. And I do think that San Francisco is on the right track with the type of assistance that they're providing their fleet. And I like that they've extended it to include the fish buyers, which we only have 3 fish buyers at our harbor. And they've also, I also think we should extend it to our charter boat operators, which I think we only have, 3 or 4 charter boats, because I've witnessed how bad their business has gotten. I mean, they can't fill boats, they don't have anybody to take out. I mean, finally they're able to get some people out now that recreational crab season is open. But what I'm hearing is that that the recreational fishermen are so freaked out about the whole scare that people aren't going out. And plus it's already like the season's over and people don't go crab fishing recreationally this time of year. It's just not traditionally what they do. So it's pretty much shot for recreational fishing as well as commercial at this point. So I just don't see that we're going to have any sort of recovery at this time. And I would really feel more comfortable if we were expanding this to include the fish buyers at a minimum, but I also think we should be considering the charter boats. So I'd like to include both. And I'd also like to follow in San Francisco's footsteps and expand it to a 3-month versus a 1-month I do think it's very important that we verify that, that we're assisting those in need, and that we be sure that they are actually active fishermen, fish buyers, and charter boat operators. So I think that's really critical, because there are, like Steve pointed out, there are people with commercial permits that don't actively fish, and I don't know all the details with that. I'm not an expert, but I do think we need to verify. So that the staff would need to come up with a sensible process for doing that verification. So I would really like to make a motion that we recommend, or that we, this isn't worded right, that we consider, or that we include a waiver for 3 months fees for Dungeness crab fishermen in good standing, and fish buyers, and charter boat operators at Pillar Point Harbor, as of October 31st, 2015.
Is there a second? Being that there's no second, the motion fails. I'll continue with discussion. Commissioner Bernardo?
Thank you. I personally feel that I think 3 months is too much. I'm okay with 1 or 2, because staff recommendation was 1, and our speaker tonight had also suggested 1. So I'm teetering and tottering between 1 and 2, but I would like to include some caveats, including what staff has said on page 3. If you take a look here, the policy implications, if you look at those 1 through 4, number 1, I would like to extend this to those directly affected, not, sort of like not indirect businesses that are affected, but those who are directly affected. So that's number 1. For number 2.
So you wouldn't be in support of number 1, is that correct?
Well, part of number 1.
Okay.
Those directly affect, so like charter boats. And then also, I would support 2, 3, and 4, because I think they raise good points, and I'm just going to read them really quickly. That slip fee waivers be only extended to resident boats. Number 3, that slip fee waivers not be extended to fishermen without history of crab fishing here, because if you take a look at San Francisco, they do the same thing. For fishermen who have permits with a history with the port. And then number 4, that recipients of slip fee waivers will be required to pay the forgiven fee on a receipt of disaster relief.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Sure.
So when I made the motion, my intention was that it only applied to fishermen with, or charter boat operators, or fish buyers who are actually tenants at Pillar Point Harbor. So I'm not talking about out-of-town boats that happen to be stopping through. They need to get relief at their home harbor. But I'm talking about our local tenants.
Okay.
Specifically.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have
So
more?
that's all I wanted to say, was that so 2 things. 1, I'm okay with the 1 to 2 month. Either one's fine with me. And then also, for number 2, 3, and 4 of page 3, that would be sort of my motion.
Well,
all of
can
that.
we finish discussion first?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sorry,
You don't have to, unless you want to make a motion, but.
No, that's all I want to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. So I do have some comments to make. I think that what we're presented here is something that is a focused item right now, which is the plight of the crab season closure, or the crab fishermen, the crab fishermen, because of the crab season closure. But I think the bigger issue is a policy issue, and it really talks about what role does the government play in all of this. And I'm torn. I actually agree with the staff recommendation to waive 1 month's fee, and I would actually agree with Commissioner Bernardo for items 2, 3, and 4 regarding addressing these issues. I would prefer to narrowly focus this on the crab, the people who are directly affected with the crab, from the crab season. And I would like to tie it to something that is, I mean, I don't know if this has been a state of the emergency, but something that is an emergency situation, which I think that the current crab season closure is. Instead of just having it, you know, be open to anyone directly or indirectly. I mean, at the end of the day, these fees are for commercial purposes, and as an enterprise district, we also have to be very cognizant that this is revenue generating for us. And as the grand jury reports and the LAFCO report has said, that, you know, we need to be more sensitive to how we balance the enterprise and the non-enterprise activities and how they are being billed, and the kinds of income that we receive from the taxpayer versus commercial activity, if you will. But so I would support the staff recommendation for a waiver for 1 month, but tie it to the fact that this is really statewide an emergency situation. And you know, just so that we're very clear that this is the reason that we would be waiving the fee for 1 month, instead of, you know, creating a slippery slope, as you would you know, cautioned us on.
Can I make
Steve,
a comment
can
when
I
it's
finish?
my turn?
I'm sorry.
I'm just letting you know.
So that is, that's my thought at this point. I just think that as a matter of public policy, we have to be very careful not to create a slippery slope, and yet be very sensitive to, and I would call it a crisis. It's a statewide crisis, but tie it to that kind of an emergency or a crisis. Yes.
Thank you. So I'd just like to point out that we are going to have more than a slippery slope on our hands if we lose our tenants because they go out of business. So I think that's really where it's at with the level of severity of the situation. So I think, you know, it's easy to sit here and talk about it on the dais, but what's happening in the real world is people are really suffering. And I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, because if we lose our tenants, these are our long-standing tenants. This is where we get our monthly slip fees, and we have a vested interest in helping them continue with their businesses. So it may be a short-term loss for the district, but it's a long-term investment in a relationship with strong tenants who attract visitors to our harbor. So from a business standpoint, it's really a good business decision for the district to support our fishing fleet in a crisis. And this is definitely a crisis. I mean, we know our elected officials have been discussing it as such. So it is a crisis. It is hurting people. They are having a hard time putting food on the table, and we need to take action to be of assistance, and that will help ensure that we're able to continue that long-term relationship over the years, which is extremely important. And that's why Pillar Point Harbor has such a high occupancy rate, because we have our fleet, and it's really important that our fleet continue. So I just can't stress that enough. I hear what you're saying, and I understand, you know, we do have to always keep in mind our fiscal responsibility. But I think that it is actually fiscally responsible in this emergency situation, and I agree that we should describe it as an emergency to help out the fishermen who are in need. And I do think that you can make a direct correlation between this devastating crab fishery situation and our commercial crabbing fishermen and also our charter boat operators who take out recreational fishermen who crab, and there are a lot more recreational fishermen than there are commercial, so it's not as if that is an important part of the industry. And also our fish buyers. Without the fish buyers, there's no way to offload the fish. So it's all directly related. Not one part of that is indirect. So I would just emphasize that. And if we are going to do something less than 3 months, which is what we now know Bodega Bay is offering, and also our closest fishing port neighbor, San Francisco, is providing, I think that we should bring it back quickly for a future agenda so that we can add additional time, add additional months going forward. I don't think we should limit it. I'm not comfortable with limiting it to 1 month. I think that's out of step with what other fishing ports are doing right now.
Okay, so just a quick question, Steve. I mean, these funds that we would be spending for this waiver, well, we wouldn't be receiving these funds. So out of what bucket would we be losing the money? It's not, I mean, because essentially, I guess my concern is, and I have talked to people in my area about this, and they're torn, they understand, and I've gotten mixed reviews. And they don't live on the coast, but they do pay taxes. And so some of this, would be at the subsidy of the taxpayers. And I don't think they would care if it's 1 month, but, the recreational crab season has opened. I don't know when the commercial one is going to be open, but, I mean, we could always bring it back, if we need another month or another 2 months. But I just think that right now it should be very narrowly focused, because I'm not sure from a taxpayer standpoint, that this makes the most sense. But, I don't know what bucket would this come out of, I guess.
I may defer this to Glenn, but at this point, we are in the middle of the budget year.
Yes.
And I think it would probably show up in the closeout of the year, whether in fact we had met or not met our enterprise revenue goals. Glenn?
That's exactly correct.
And would you remind us what the enterprise revenue goal is?
Enterprise revenue is a shorthand way.
No, goal, the goal.
What is the number?
Oh, the number. That number would be, we looked at the consolidated expenses that I happen to have for the mid-year budget report. There are a number of line items, I don't have a total for, but there are a number of line items that are monies that we get because we rent berths, have leases, and those revenues, pretty much the bulk of the revenue that is not under the category of tax revenue is actually enterprise revenue.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is, if we're talking slip fees, we're talking berth revenue.
Right.
Yes.
So that's, as you can see, is, as a percentage of the total is not huge, but it is important. So, I'm not sure how to put
I'm
that
trying
in
to find,
context, but
I know, I'm
certainly
hoping for
we
a
could-
number,
we
but.
could report on, I think that would be easiest is if an action is taken. I think Steve did, the general manager did a very good job of trying to assess from not knowing what size slips and how many would be affected.
Right,
what
the
impact would be.
range.
I would use his, I think it was $23,000.
Well, the 9,048 on the low end and 22,113
Right.
on the high end.
So looking at that in the overall scheme of our revenues, that would end up either being supported by property taxes
Right.
and other tax type revenues, or if we fell below our targets, I guess there's always the possibility that it would impact the amount of money that was available for reserves. But I think it's small enough that it would be safe to say that it would probably end up being coming out of, being supported by property tax income. Obviously, you know, if your revenues drop way more than you anticipate, you have to come back and make adjustments to your expenditures.
To budget, yeah.
I think,
But I think this is a small amount.
very broad
For the
brush,
overall.
very broad brush, we've got 400 slips, plus or minus. We're talking about 40 births.
About
So we're talk-
10%,
About 10% for 1/12 of the year.
right.
So,
That's why I don't have a problem with 1 month. I just want it to be
Right.
known.
So-
I wanted to find out
but
where,
it's less than 1% of projected birth revenue.
Okay.
In very, very broad brushstrokes.
We're not talking about, in the scheme of things, that much money.
no, I understand, but it's not really about the money. It's about the principle that it would be subsidized by taxes. So anyway,
Well, just point of order, we are subsidizing almost 50% of our district through property tax. So
no,
you-
50% of our budget comes from property taxes.
50% comes from property tax, so the taxpayers.
That doesn't mean we subsidize 50%.
The taxpayers are subsidizing this district. There's no other way to describe it. The taxpayers subsidize this district, 50% of this district is subsidized by the taxpayers.
Right, and that's the point of the two reports, Lafdo and
tax-
grand jury, that we should be able to clearly delineate between enterprise and non-enterprise activities, because tax money should be supporting non-enterprise activities. That's the point.
Well-
And this is an enterprise activity in my mind. But because it's a crisis, and I would like to tie it to a crisis, I think that it should be narrowly focused. And so I would make a motion to accept staff's recommendation to waive 1 month's fee for Dungeness crab fishermen in good standing as of October 31st, 2015.
And as a taxpayer, I'd like to say,
Can we get a second on the motion?
I will second that.
Thank you.
so as a taxpayer, as a property taxpayer, I contribute to this district.
We all do. Everyone who lives in San Mateo County does.
People who own property are contributing because it's a property tax. It's not a sales tax, it's a property tax.
I understand that. It's a
Not
tax.
everybody owns property. Some people rent. So as a homeowner, as a property.
Anyone? Right.
As a property
that.
tax, if I could just finish, as a property tax payer who subsidizes the district, I'm one of many, I would really like my subsidy of this district to help our fishing fleet.
Great, then I think you can donate money to the
I
Harbor
just
District.
want to say that I would like to know that that's one of the things that we're doing as a district, is we're helping our fleet in a disaster. And I'd like to point out the letter that's attached in our board packet from
Yes.
Governor Brown here. So, you know, this is truly an emergency.
Right,
And
and we are waiving the fees for 1 month.
I'm really uncomfortable with that. I think that, you know, I would hope we could compromise.
There's a
And
motion
I know
and a
that
second.
Commissioner Bernardo expressed comfort with 2 months. I'm hoping that we could amend the motion to,
I'm sorry, I support the motion, and the reason why I support it is because, one, I want this to pass tonight, because it is urgent, it's an emergency, and two, we can always come back later and get more.
More time.
So, but right now, I want to pass this, that's why I supported this motion.
the one you prefer.
The 1 month,
you
for
prefer-
now.
You prefer the 1 month.
For right now, yes, because we could always come back and later if we have to, but I support the motion right now.
Okay, so if we're done with discussion, I'd like to call for the vote.
I'd just like to make
Okay,
one last
please.
comment, which is, there's only 3 of us here tonight, and I certainly don't want to vote against providing some assistance to the fishermen, so I have no choice but to vote for the motion. But I'm voting for the motion in protest because I feel strongly that we aren't doing enough. And I'm really disappointed with my fellow board members in not seeing how critical the situation is, and not being willing and not being able to find it in your heart to do more to help our fleet. So I just needed to express that.
Great, and so I will make one last comment, which is, I understand your disappointment, but I also think that we have to balance non-enterprise and enterprise activities. And so that's the reason that I'm supporting a 1-month waiver of the fees. And we can always bring it back if we need to add more time. So if we can have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you to the public members who came and spoke. That was very, very helpful.
May I have one question of clarification? This is a 1-month thing for just the fishermen that qualify? Nothing for...
Yes,
buyers
as of October 31st, 2015, those in good
And that
standing.
doesn't include charter boats and it doesn't include fish buyers?
It's a Dungeness crab fisherman. Thank you. Shameful.
Can we take a break, please?
Please, yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. Robert?
President Matoush, the Public Records Act allows...
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
We're missing
Oh.
a commissioner, sorry.
I thought I
She's
just saw
talking
it.
to someone.
That's okay, we still have a quorum.
Okay.
I don't mind.
It's okay, we have a quorum.
I don't mind waiting.
She's talking to that gentleman who you were talking to.
This is, Tom, we have a quorum. I don't know why she chose to go out.
No, she heard he was from South San Francisco, and then she ran out.
Chose to go
Okay.
out. We have a
Yeah.
You want
quorum.
me to keep going?
We need to
Yeah, we
keep
have a
going.
quorum. Keep
Okay.
going.
So the Public Records Act, as it says in policy implications, allows for an agency to adopt policies more stringent than the requirements established in the Public Records Act itself. So last year, the Commission adopted a policy on the Public Records Act, regarding the policy required that non-exempt electronic documents be provided in a time frame shorter than was required in the Act. Staff has been trying diligently to work with the policy, has consistently not been able to meet the goals of the policy while maintaining consistency with the requirements of the Act itself. I bring this forward to you as a professional administrator who takes pride in being able to, first and foremost, comply with the law of the land, and secondly, comply with the policies of the district I serve. And it pains me to not be able to meet the requirements of a policy so recently adopted. We simply cannot do that with the volume and size of the PRA request we've been receiving. So at this point, staff is requesting that the Commission rescind the policy adopted on January 7th, 2015, and then staff will continue to endeavor to meet requests in the earliest time frame possible, even if it's much shorter than, and on occasion has been within hours of receipt of a request, but nevertheless will continue to abide by all the legal requirements of the Public Records Act. I think that's the sum and the essence of my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, before I take commissioner comments, I've got a public comment from John Ullum.
Thanks for having me up here. As we all know, PRA requests are important to keeping accountability in government. We've proven that with this district many times. It's too bad the fishermen left. It would have known it was a $2 million, or it was a PRA request that revealed that this district subsidizes South San Francisco to the tune of $2 million a year. And I'm sure your friends in Menlo Park, Commissioner Chang Corrali, would have an opinion on that, wouldn't they? $2 million subsidy for a private marina, basically, for a city. Anyway, just some things to consider. What generates PRA requests? Well, if you use the data against each other, you can expect PRA requests. If somebody dares us to file a PRA request on the district because they made a claim that somebody caused a 1,000% jump increase in lawyer fees, what do you expect to happen, Mr. Bernardo? They're going to ask for that information. So one way you can reduce PRA requests is just to be a little bit more careful about what you say in the claims you make against each other. If you're going to use your position in other boards to score political points with claims that prove not to be true, you can expect Public Record Act requests. Ms. Chang, you have something better to do?
I'm listening.
That doesn't look that way.
I've heard this spiel over and over, so please
Spiel?
continue.
Okay. So Public Record Acts are spiel, according to Commissioner Director Chang, but in fact they're not. They're an important part of government function and the public's access to government. I see you all have a problem with that, the public being involved in this commission. Maybe you like the way it was being run for the last 2 decades. Some of you did. Some of the things to consider are your policy does not address what to do with, that you're suggesting here to do with my PRA requests, which I understand prompted some of these changes to policy. I don't care if you want to change the policy. No one's ever sued this district or ever did anything about PRA requests being late or hard to get. This is all a made-up fear, but I guess it's legitimate. But and if that's the case, as you both know, you do not have the right, and Mr. Lazoff I'm sure knows it, do not have the right to deny me access to lawyer invoices. You guys do, but your lawyer doesn't, neither does your management. Yet today I received an email from them telling me that they were not going to provide what I asked for, even though they have not been directed by this board, even though there is no policy discussing the release of lawyers' fees. Thank you, I don't need to get cut off. Appreciate it.
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, Commissioner comments. Commissioner Chan-Crowley.
Through the chair, thank you. I agree with the staff recommendation, and I would like to make a motion to rescind the board's policy on PRA requests adopted on January 7th, 2015. Not because I don't think the public should not have access to these records. The public has every right, and that is taken care of by state law. And what we have now from this ridiculous policy is undue burden placed on the one permanent employee of the district right now in the administrative offices to go through this and to have a Public Records Act policy that is stricter than state law when we're bare bones thin on administrative staff is ridiculous. So that would be my motion.
Any other
If there's
commissioner comments?
There's a second to the motion.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I will second it.
Do we have any other? Commissioner Bernardo.
Just very briefly on this topic of PRA requests, coincidentally today I attended, in my day job at the Port of Oakland, I attended a 2-hour Public Records Act legal training given by our staff, by our legal team, and it was just a really good reminder. The bottom line takeaway, and actually I'm going to share some of the documents that I have with staff, and also the commission. I'd like everyone to see the handouts that were given. But the bottom line thing that I learned at the training, the PRA training at the Port of Oakland today, was our attorney, Eugene, said, the bottom line is this. The goal of the PRA, obviously, the spirit is to increase transparency, and that's something we all want to do. I don't think there's anyone on here who wouldn't want to increase transparency, but at the same time, it's a balancing act with some PRA requests that are excessive and cumbersome. So that's really what this is about, and I'm going to vote yes on this because the excessive and cumbersome, I mean, I'm not even going to speak for staff. They can speak for themselves on the excessive and cumbersome, but I am going to support this. And I'm also going to share the information that I have with staff and my fellow commissioners as well, too. Thank you.
And Commissioner Bernardo, just to point out, if you distribute documents at the commission meeting to the board, then they do become public record.
Of course.
Put them up on the website.
That'd be fantastic. Yes, I think everyone can learn from the class that I took today. It was very fascinating.
Any other commissioner comments?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. So I think that it's important to reflect on why this policy was approved by the board previously. I'm hopeful that it's outlived its usefulness, and so I think that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. But previously, there was a chronic problem at this district in responding to public records requests. Our staff was not responsive, and I experienced that on a number of occasions, as did members of the public. It was almost impossible to get information in any sort of timely fashion or at all. And so because of the problems with past management, this policy was necessary when it was approved. I think at this time we have new management, and I think our general manager is attempting to do the best he can to respond to public records requests. At least I hope that's what's happening. I do know that right now we have a PRA request in from the city of South San Francisco, which last I heard was 7,800 documents. And that's about the most cumbersome PRA request I've heard of, although I'm sure there have probably been some that are even bigger at other agencies. I'm sure that that's the largest PRA request that this agency has ever received. So I know that that has caused all kinds of staff time. I've been over at our office when we've had paid consultants working away in our archive of boxes trying to organize things. We've had to pay our law firm to come in and review decades worth of old archival paper documents, trying to sort through them and figure out what was okay to share and what wasn't. And it's still a work in progress. So I do understand the stress this has put on our staff, and I understand the costs that the district has incurred due to this large PRA request. And I just wanted to, remind our general manager that we really don't want to turn back the clock and have the kinds of problems that we've had in the past. But on the other hand, obviously there's no way that you can respond to a 7,800 page document request in 10 days. And I did also want to point out that the policy that's attached in the board packet was revised. So this is not the revised version. This was a version that predated the revised version from my memory, but whatever, it's close enough. The revised version was 5 to 10 days. I believe 10 days is what state law says, and then you can ask for an extension. I think the key is to have good communication with the people who put in requests. And my experience has been when an agency communicates with a person putting in a PRA request and lets them know, hey, we're working on it. We haven't forgotten about you. We are working on it, but we need more time. My experience has been that the public is actually really appreciative of the communication, and I've never run across a situation where a public member wasn't willing to, allow the district to take the time they needed to pull the documents. So I think it's just a matter of good communication, and then making every effort to try to meet state law as much as possible. So I'm going to support the motion.
Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Chang Crawley?
One last comment. To be fair to the city of South San Francisco, their PRA request came in at the end of the calendar year. This policy was put in place at the beginning of the calendar year. My understanding, that timing aside, I don't know what's going on, but my understanding is that they have been working with staff to make it so that the timeliness of their request is, done in a reasonable manner. So I don't want to make this look like that the blame should go on one city, because I don't think it's one city that's been dealing with these PRA requests.
Just a point of order, the policy dated in this board packet is 2014, so this wasn't a policy that was,
Well, it
Put in-
says here, it says on the staff report, adopted on January 7th, 2015.
well, if you read the policy attached, it says December 26, 2014. And the PRA request from South San Francisco is much more recent than the policy.
Right, that's my point.
So,
I don't think that you can just say that South San Francisco's Public Records Act request is necessarily prompting this, but
If I may jump in, Commissioner Matoush, there's no single PRA request.
That's my point.
That generated this request of staff. The document attached was dated December 26th, but the relevant page of the minutes from the January 7th
Right.
meeting are also in the staff report that show that the policy was adopted and amended on January the 7th. And I would be remiss at this point if I did not publicly recognize the effort that Glenn Lazoff has been putting in to managing our PRA requests.
thank you, Glenn.
We have any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Carabano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 12. Mid-year budget review and budget adjustments. Approve the following budget adjustments. May we have a staff report?
Yes, I would say that if you look at the reports that are attached, the financial reports that are in the attachment, these are the type of report that I know this general manager and his predecessor have been trying to get for a long time. And, some meetings have arrived on the scene. We were told, and it is true, that with our current financial system and just the way it is set up and has traditionally been used, this report, which is some variant of it, exists in every public agency, has been difficult to get out. And this one that you have in front of you isn't perfect either, but I think it is a marked step forward in being able to look at the progress of the budget. Ron Quicktar worked very hard creating the bridge between our financial system and the report you have before you. In fact, she worked so hard that we wanted to get this to you, but we didn't have as much time for analysis as we would normally do. But you'll see this greatly improved by third quarter and on in the future. So if I'm excited about it, it's just because it's showing light on areas that, for me, both in my new role and when I was the interim, they were dark before. And just as you see things where you have many, many questions, so do we. We're digging into them, many of the questions. Our focus as to where we put our priorities when we look into these questions, because we can see overall from here that essentially the budget is in good shape. We're not overspending. Our revenues are coming in as they should. So our focus is what items that we have are going to interfere with our ability to give you a very good budget for 16-17. What accounts need to be grouped together? What will make this more meaningful process for management, including the business? So that's the focus on what we're trying to fix right now. Just before we get into the charts, and also we couldn't resist making some pie charts, even though they're quite simple, so we'll get those up on the screen. And then throw it open for your comments and questions. I do want to change the recommended motion and not do the increase in transfer to salaries and benefits, but merely leave the recommendation to be the operating expenses transfer. And the reason is, I am not comfortable with the budgeted projection for salaries, because I can already have spotted some glaring problems. I can see that they are not running over budget, and I would rather have the period into the third quarter review to really get to the bottom. I know that we aren't going to get into serious financial trouble or overexpend our salaries budgets by that time, and I just want to be able to dig a little deeper before making those salary adjustments. The operating expense adjustment that I made which could also wait to third quarter too, but what it allows is, it was an unanticipated expense. We know we made it. It makes sense to me to make that adjustment. Other than that, I just want to kind of describe the chart you're looking at. The first column of numbers is what was budgeted, the amended budget for this year. You may recall that we did 2 budget revisions over the summer, and they were small, but they are reflected in the amended full year budget. The next column is 15-16, first quarter and second quarter actual to date through December. The third column is the percent of budgeted amount that was in the case of revenue received and in the case of expenditures expended. And that fourth column is how the actuals from the first half of last year matched, were relative to that year's budget. So keeping in mind that, for example, it could be that if there are a bigger percentage of revenue was received in the first half of the year last year, it could be because more revenue was received, but it could also be because the budget projection was inadequate. So it's a good tool, but it's important for analysis to know, what these numbers are actually telling you. And certainly, Yvonne and I are here to help. We have some detail that we may be able to answer some questions tonight, but generally we'll probably have to get back to you. And we've broken it down according to department, so that we've got Pillar Point, Oyster Point. We have combined admin and commission because management doesn't really see a purpose in them being separate. The commission is part of the administration of the district. On those department budgets, we're largely relying on how expenses were classified in fund balance. So some questions that we have there are going to require some deeper probing because just trying to build some more confidence in the entries that were made in the system on the department level. We have the most confidence in that consolidated of all departments. And I think that was it for my introductory remarks.
You want to talk about the slide?
Oh, thank you. So we couldn't, as I mentioned, we couldn't resist eye chart. I'm going to look at this one because I have old eyes. So what you're looking at is the revenue from so far at quarter, and this is the pie of all revenue received. And the portion of it that was enterprise revenue, you can see the second largest pie, 41%. The piece that was grants, which hardly shows on the meter. Other, and then the amount that was taxes. The property taxes, all the different kinds of property taxes, the redevelopment pass-through that we now receive. And then the next slide is what the pie looked like, that same pie last year. Now again, remember that if the enterprise pie piece may look bigger than it does this year, but that could just as well be because the tax slice was smaller last year. So, and our enterprise may have not dropped as much as it would appear from just looking at the pie. But it gives you the idea of the relative weight, and if 2 years is a trend, and I would suggest it's not, it would tell you where it's headed. By the way, on grants, I just want to say that one of the things you'll see in the consolidated statement is that the grant that we have for the removal of abandoned vessels, the revenue is 0, but that's because we haven't filed any reimbursement claims from this period. We have them, they're in the pipeline, but that's why we don't have any grant revenue mid-year. And then the next slice, or pie, is expense. And no surprise is that salaries are the largest piece, followed by operating, non-operating, and the capital expenses. What is a little surprising is 90% of the places that you go, salaries comes out to about 2/3 of the budget, no matter how difficult, how much you dig in and how hard you crack those numbers to get them accurate. They usually are about 2/3. Ours is one of the few that's a bit more lopsided than that. And we're going to be looking into why that is. I think that certainly part of it is that we have regular staff that is being replaced by contractors during this year. But also, I think it's also possible that there are funds in operating that probably, that have been, well, we know some that have been misclassified that should be capital expenses. So we have to look at that. The next year, if we look at the next slide, this one is a little closer to the typical picture of the 2/3 and the still 41% in operating. The big difference between this slide and the one before it is you'll notice that, and this is, I wouldn't call it cause for a party, but it's of note. That's because this year we have capital expenses. It means that we're actually getting some work done.
Right.
In 14-15, we didn't have capital expenses. So I think this is a baby step, but I think it's well worth pointing out.
Yeah, good.
So our motion here, well, we'll get a little discussion that, let's get Commissioner discussion first.
Yeah, I have a question through the chair.
Commissioner?
Glenn, it's just a clarifying question. First of all, thanks to you and Yvonne for putting this together. I think it's the clearest that I have seen in terms of financial documents for this district since 2007. So thank you for doing that. Just a quick question regarding, this is page 96 of 128, regarding operating expenses, ex salaries and benefits. The claim settlement, contractual services, professional and contractual retained counsel. Can you help me define what contractual services professional means? Because I look at this and it's like 230% versus 32% versus, and if you look at that compared to the contractual retained counsel, which I'm assuming is the is the district's retention of Mr. Hanson and Bridget, that's 40% versus 63% year over year. And the reason I'm concerned is that we have a budgeted amount for fiscal year 15-16 for $753,000, and we are in the actual of Q1, Q2 of $663,000. And I'm not understanding what contractual service professional means. And I'm sorry, I don't know that definition.
Well,
if you can help me clarify
first of all,
that.
you have keyed in on one of the questions that we need to look into. And really what we're looking, professional services would include, and this will lead to your next question, so the answer there too, would include items such as RGS.
Okay.
It would include our consultants working on our permitting. It could include some project work that is not, Yvonne's contract.
Okay, got it.
It could include some project work that was misclassified. I'm actually more concerned, not so much with that, but the fact that this is the I'm not sure how the previous finance director determined that these costs were appropriate for administrator and commission.
When they put the previous
Correct.
budget together.
It makes sense to me that Robert Half and RGS would be, but those would not total that amount, so that's one of the things we have to look at. I think that the departmental decision-making, which can be subjective, was not the same that I would make. But we'll have to dig into that. If we look at the consolidated, let's see if it has different information. The consolidated looks much more balanced, which tends to make me, one of the first places I'll be looking is, why was that classified in administration and
Commissioner.
And commission?
Okay. Okay, so that's a work in progress still, right, for those particular line items?
I'm only smiling because this is all a work in progress.
Okay.
And the goal is to have much more clarity on how items get classified when we go to 16, 17.
Okay.
And
Th-
if I may,
Yes,
and the retained
please.
counsel is not just Hanson Bridget, that's
Oh, the,
all of our.
Liebert
team.
Cassidy.
Liebert
The-
Cassidy.
Yeah, okay, got
Constable
it, got it,
Nunn.
thank you.
And our maritime.
Yep.
Council,
Cotswood.
got it.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Any other comments here?
I have a quick question. So Glenn, I've heard you say, you said this at the finance committee as well, that, oh, I'm sure you've, noticed there's some, I don't know, unusual things about this or questions, but you haven't said what you think the questions are, except this last little bit we just talked about. What other things on here are you noticing that stand out as questions or oddities?
I'll just quickly go through the ones which are in the staff report, and the reason they're in the staff report is because that's as far as I got by diddling. But for example, there's a debit to revenue for birth promo.
Yeah.
This is not the way I would classify birth promo. Maybe historically, commissioners had a particular interest in wanting to know, have a line item as a way of tracking when we get discounts for paying in advance and that sort of thing. Normally, it would be rolled into your birth revenue. You would collect less revenue, you wouldn't have a credit there. There'd be other ways to report the information if you were interested in the impact of the promo. But to me, it's confusing to see a credit to revenue, which really means that money was expended and you shouldn't be expending through revenue because that's what expenditures are for,
Right.
to put it bluntly. If I go on too long, just stop me. I mentioned the abandoned vessel grant, that it looks like we have no grant revenue, and that's simply a matter of the receivable being booked properly. In fact, upon what happens, we see this, I issue a memo to staff, and now we're all lined up so that when we submit those grants, we will report them to receivable in the period for which they're due. So that's what's great about these kinds of reports. Miscellaneous revenue, looks like we are doing great, but it includes that one-time revenue that we got from the water district. Property tax, I was just describing that there's a trend here where most public agencies I've been associated with, Steve's past, you get most of your property tax in the first half of the year, 55%.
Yeah.
A smaller bit in the second half. This county seems to do it differently than we're used to, or at least the money seems to be rolling in differently. But it also rolled in that way last year, so again, I'm not concerned. But it was unusual. Transient dockage.
Well, what do you mean unusual? When is it?
Because usually I'm used to getting 55% of my property tax. There's a certain number of people that you can either pay half your property tax on the first bill and half at the second bill, and there's a certain percentage of people that pay it all the first time. So you usually get a little bit more than half. It's different from what I'm used to seeing. So I mentioned it. The transient dockage, this is good news, we've got more revenue, but always looking for the flaw. How was this projected in the past? I would rather accurately project the revenue. It looks like it's coming in quite a bit better than it was projected. And it could be a one-time thing. Maybe, it was such a nice summer that we had more transient voters. So, but those are questions that, would normally be asked by finance staff. In salary and benefits, I just pointed out, it's really hard to tell because we've had so many temporary staff and so many vacancies, and are making a really strong effort to fill them now. So it's hard to tell how that trend is going out, which is why I wanted to put up that adjustment to the third quarter. But just some things that I know are that the general manager started a month earlier, and the bulk of the general manager's time with us will be in the second half because he started in November. I have actually got more information since I wrote this on Social Security because I asked if you do the math, the Social Security doesn't I'm getting the hook. If there are particular things you want me to draw out, I will.
Are you done, Sabrina?
Go ahead.
On that consolidated revenues page, near the third item from the bottom, state mandated costs, where you got the 116% versus the 0%. I mean, can you just tell me what the what are state mandated costs? How is that defined?
Part of Prop 13,
Okay.
part of post-Prop 13 legislation was that if the state passes a bill, passes legislation that creates more work for governments, they have to refund, they have to reimburse us. Unfortunately, the law did not say when they had to reimburse
Okay.
us. So what all of us do, all of us governments, is most of us hire a consultant who, for a piece of the action, files for there's the Brown Act expense and just a myriad of things. And every now and then, when the governor has a surplus, they actually pay some of these. And you can't really predict very well what's coming in. So I think what probably was done here was an average. But these are some very old claims. And by the way, I understand that the governor has allocated more money in the last couple of budgets for state mandated costs.
So it's
this
not
could
an
be a trend
unfunded
until we
mandate.
catch up. Now, for budgeting, I would be conservative and try to put a low number if something's, I would rather count on less money than more. So if it's moving like this, it'll probably be the bottom of the curve that I budget. But we always appreciate the windfall, but that's, again, too lengthy an explanation of.
Well, but eventually, we will be paid back, and then that line item, state-funded, state-mandated reimbursement will go away.
That's correct.
Because the law has changed.
Right.
We don't get those, we're not continuing to accrue a lot of those
Right, and keep in
state-mandated costs.
It's a reimbursement. At some point in our history, we
Okay.
spent that money.
Yeah, okay, so that helps. And then, so regarding you want to delete for now, the increases in salaries and benefits from, of the 272,000. I think that was from the reorg,
No.
thing. Is that part, I thought that was part of, when is this going to be put in, I guess, in the 16-17
I think
budget?
that probably the permanent hires for the reorg won't happen until July. The district isn't fortunate enough with how the recruitments go. But the report that the manager wrote was, and I looked at it, was absolutely accurate. Assuming, and we think that enough money is in the pot, that the budget was built based on the positions that we had.
Right.
There was, the new positions represented a savings over the old positions. So if I have to come back to you and plead for mercy in the third quarter and say, oops, we need more money, it could be, the answer that you might hear from me is, now that I've done a full analysis, we didn't have money in there for all of our positions. But right now, it looks with all the vacancy savings that we've had, we're doing pretty good.
Okay, thanks.
I just have one last thing. I just wanted to thank the staff for all the effort that's going into this work. And it is something that we haven't seen before. So I wanted to recognize that.
Ditto. Right here.
All right, so our recommendation is approve the following budget adjustments. So we're going to strike the first one and just go the increase operating expenses of 68,000, decrease unassigned reserves of 340,000.
680, just 68,000 on the reserve. So it takes this.
Yep, so both of those are going to be struck?
So it'll be $68,000 increase in operating expenses and a decrease unassigned reserve, 68,000.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Carrelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Caravano?
Aye.
President Mateo?
Aye. Okay, item 13, budget calendar and direction.
Thank you, President Mateusz. I'm going to jump in on the budget calendar on this one before we go back to Glenn for the appropriations policy. Harbors and Navigation Code provides some statutory requirements for budget development, providing certain key dates and intervals between those key dates. The biggest one of which is that we have fix a budget by the end of June, and we supply that budget to the Board of Supervisors by the end of July. The schedule that you've got here is a doable but aggressive schedule that shows adoption of a preliminary budget in April, review in May, adoption at the second meeting in June, interspersed with Finance Committee meetings to review and possibly dig in a little deeper on direction of the Commission. One of the things I didn't introduce into this calendar was specifically call out for the inclusion in all of this of the capital budget, and also the idea that we're going to be developing a comprehensive 5-year capital improvements program. I think it's also important as we look at some of these items to recognize the difference in goals and the imperatives of the process. And as you can see from the work that Glenn and Yvonne have been doing so far, I mean, I can't, again, speak high enough of the work they've been doing, and you saw that in the last staff report. Our goal is to continue to perfect this budget process, to perfect the budget itself. We know that the budget you're going to get by the end of this calendar is going to be a clearer and cleaner document. It's going to be more readily understandable to the general public, the lay person like myself. And it's going to identify public and enterprise funds. It's going to be simpler in some ways, such as the combining of admin and Harbor Commission that Glenn mentioned. But it's going to be a lot of work to get there. We're going to need the help and the cooperation of the Commission and help and cooperation of the Finance Committee to get there. I know that I've already been talking with, for example, our harbor masters about what they've heard filtering up from the ranks and what they've observed about their capital projects and major maintenance projects for the coming fiscal year. And we'll be talking about goals and objectives, where of course we want to make sure that we try to the greatest extent possible to complete the major maintenance and capital projects we've got for the current fiscal year. We want to make sure too that we don't develop a list for the 16-17 fiscal year that is on its face unachievable.
Yeah.
Again, I'd speak back to some of, I think, all of us sitting at these tables, the pride that we take professionally in the work product we put out. It doesn't satisfy us to not be able to accomplish things that we establish or we propose for the budget that the Commission approves. So with that, this is an informational item, really. I do address in this the goal that Glenn and I have talked about. There is an association called the Government Finance Officers Association. We recognize we're not in a place to apply for that award for the 2016-17 fiscal year, but we would like to believe that based upon the work that we do through this budget process and the work that Yvonne and Glenn are doing, that we can come to you with a budget for the 2017-18 fiscal year that we would feel worthy of submittal to the GFOA for a distinguished budget presentation award. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Commissioner questions? Commissioner
Chair,
Chan-Crowley?
thank you. So, thank you so much for this, Steve. And I agree that the budget should be a document that's clear and understandable to members of the public. And you and I discussed, even putting together a little, I know there's a glossary, but even like on the actual form, what's an unassigned, and committed funds, things like that, because it can be confusing. But that's neither here nor there in terms of, where you put it, but just so long as it's available. A couple of things. I guess, so when are we going to include the GASB 68 liability? It's got to go in the 16-17 fiscal year budget, right?
Which is that now?
GASB 68 for the pension liabilities?
We have the pension liability report from, I had that number from, I guess what they do is they use the 14-15, the 13-14 number becomes the liability report that is reported in your 14-15 financials.
Is that our most
audit
recent?
for 14-15 is so late that we will have that number. We may actually have that number in time for this audit. So we are reporting that as well as the district's own version of the post-employment benefit expenses.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, but the GASB 68 reporting of our unfunded pension liability is in our financial statements, but not in our budget.
Right.
Although we could, when we develop that GFOA document, we probably will have it in there.
Right.
Budget.
And during this brief pause, Commissioner Mateusz, if I recommend a motion is made to continue the meeting past 9:30.
I was going to make that
All
motion
right.
right at the following this item.
Do you
Yes.
need a motion?
Yes, we need a motion to extend the meeting until perhaps 10 o'clock.
I move that we extend the meeting past 10 PM, or should I say 10:05? 10:05?
Second?
Do I hear 10?
Okay, I'll give you the second. So
Oh,
we
I
can-
thought you seconded it. I would have seconded it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry, I thought you said,
I was
I'll
asking
second
for a
it.
second, okay. So all in favor, voice vote? Aye.
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 Okay, so go on with item 13, please.
Okay, so that was one thing, and I know that we have, I want to talk about reserves for just a second, Glenn, because I know that some of this is going to have to go back to the Finance Committee. And I would like to understand how we are going to be dealing with reserves vis-a-vis pension liability or the CIP, capital improvements, that kind of, our reserves are about 16 to 17 million on a $10 million-ish budget. We got to use some of that money. And I think, understanding, how you want to chart out the accounts between enterprise and non-enterprise activities, that could probably help us understand how reserves should be or could be used, that kind of thing. So I would like the Finance Committee to look at, I'd like this board to, to understand that these could be important and that we should direct the Finance Committee to look at how we deal with reserves vis-a-vis our pension liabilities. Do we have enough to maybe pay down some of that to lower our rate? Do we use reserves for capital improvement and how much? And understanding the enterprise versus non-enterprise, because reserves, 53% of our budget comes from taxes, and so those things should be used for like the parking lot or dredging, things like the West Trail, things like that. So I'd like to understand how that's going to all be characterized in general, vis-a-vis, even the reserves or not. If that makes any sense, Glenn, I'm sorry.
I think it's a great topic for the Finance Committee, if the Commission wants to direct that. And in any case, it will be part of the budget documents, and with, as we've got here, we've got a first look in March, and then we have the preliminary. So with each step, it will become sharper and sharper into focus. What's the operating revenue that flows into the reserves, and what
Right.
of the reserves will flow into capital projects, and also very keen on rewriting a reserve policy.
Yes.
And being clear how we why we have reserves that the meaning of which I question, they can be made simpler.
Yeah.
And I think we should be really clear, calling something an assigned reserve when what it means is murky isn't clarity. I'd rather call it unassigned and have the world know that this is available for capital projects we intend to
Right.
carry out for the next 5 years. So, which gets us back, we will go back into the strategic plan.
Right, so I do think that's a big part of the strategic plan. So I hope that we will have a strategic planning committee meeting very soon.
Any other comments on our informational item here?
Just a couple. Just wanted to emphasize that the budget process is a public process, and traditionally, the district has had a workshop to learn about the various capital improvement projects and maintenance projects that the staff is recommending, and to hear from the public about the things that the various maintenance issues that they're concerned about. Typically, we've done one at in South City and one in on the coast side, and that is not included in the calendar. And I'm hoping that we're not going to dispense with that process, because at this time we don't have a strategic plan, and it doesn't look like we're going to have a strategic plan finished in the near term. But I do understand from staff, you know, obviously we need to start thinking in terms of sort of a 5-year plan, and how we're going to schedule some of the deferred maintenance and capital improvement projects that we already know really need to get done. So just want to make sure that we're not closing down the process, that we're keeping it open and transparent, and that we're receiving public input, because the work that we're doing, whether it be deferred maintenance, repairs, or CIP projects, it's all to benefit the users of both Oyster Point and Pillar Point. And so, you know, it's important that we really put a lot of thought into these projects, and so I just wanted to bring that up, and that's it.
One last comment, unless you have a comment. Mine's more personal.
Go ahead.
So Melanie, I didn't get the notice that there was a meeting, the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, so I had no idea there was one. And I was at the last one before this one, so I would suggest that for all of the committee meetings, that all of the board members get just a notice that it's happening, whatever you post up publicly, just so that we know what's going on. Because I would have attended the Finance Committee meeting yesterday had I known there was one. Thank you.
Okay, since item 13 is informational, we'll take the recommendations that were made by the commission, pass them on to staff. Go on to item 14. Budget appropriations policy. So may we have a staff report?
So this is a policy to clarify the process of amending the adopted budget. There has been, at least as far as I look at policies, a lack of clarity. That usually leads to misunderstandings. What we want to be clear about is that with this recommendation in this policy, the general manager's authority is limited to within the major categories. The general manager cannot increase salaries and benefits without permission of the commission. It cannot increase operating without permission of the commission. It cannot increase capital without permission of the commission. They can, and certainly cannot go into reserves without permission of the commission. This is pretty standard stuff, but it hasn't been clear to me that this was laid out anywhere in the past. The general manager can spend within the salaries and benefits, you know, doesn't have to come back if we're backfilling with extra hires and impact Social Security. But within those categorical controls, also I should have mentioned, no changes in revenues adopted revenues without coming to the commission. So that's one part of it. The second part of it, which is just as important, is a quarterly budget report like the one you have here, only continually improving, is something that you should be getting that shows you that your manager is in fact implementing the budget in accordance with how it was adopted and those appropriations that you approved according to the policy. You'll be able to see how we're doing. That's two parts. Actually, we're someday this district, and I hope it's not too far, we'll get to the point where that report will be monthly. Get that, but I mean, we will get to that point where, you know, the department heads can say, oh, this is how much I have in operating in quarter point this month. I mean, this is normal, and it's where we're headed. But this policy is just to make it very clear where that appropriation authority lies when the manager needs to go to the commission, and I guess that's it. Sorry to repeat myself.
So I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 0516 and approve budget appropriations policy 4.9.2, establishing the appropriation authority of the District Board of Harbor Commissioners and requiring quarterly budget review by the commission for now, maybe monthly in the future, Glenn.
I'll second it.
Thank
Okay, any other commission discussion?
Just that, I don't know that that description was really something that the average person could follow. I'm wondering if you could give us a more simplistic version of what is included in the resolution.
Can I see my pie chart? My pie chart?
Pie
That pie chart, get that back up there, that would help.
Okay.
Because I think the pie chart for expenditures, what I wanted to demonstrate was that with this, the part, other than the quarterly reports, which that you understand, you're going to get those every quarter. If you look at that expenditure pie.
Expenditure?
Yeah. That expenditure pie, the general manager cannot spend over the board's approved budget for salaries and benefits. That's a limitation unless they come to you. They cannot spend for the red over the bottom line of what you've approved for operating. Same is true for non-operating, same is true for capital projects. Now, if one capital project gets done under budget, the general manager does have the authority to expend on another capital project. But within those limits, they have to get the job done. And if they can't, they need to come to you and explain why.
Got it.
If there's no other comments, let's call for the roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Carabana?
Aye.
President Mateo?
Aye. Item 15, Spirit of Sacramento, options for impending Marshall sale, selection of selling broker. Staff report, please.
Well, we've finally reached the point where we're getting ready to market this vessel. Really, at this point, obviously, if we can sell it, we want to get as much of our money back or expenditures on this enterprise of removing the Spirit of Sacramento as we can. But staff's main goal has been to get this vessel out of the marina and have that dock space available to start producing revenue. But the question at this point is whether or not the district would follow a path that could put us in the position where we own the vessel. Staff definitely does not want to own this vessel. If you wanted a vessel, I'd rather buy one that was in good repair. But that's kind of the decision that we've got before us. We feel that, especially talking to council, that it was a decision that this board should make. The recommendation is that we proceed with a marketed sale of the vessel, which means that we'll obtain a broker, much like private boat owners do, to help us get the best price that we can on the vessel. And the broker is normally paid a percentage of the sale. Our maritime attorney told me that it's usually in the range of 8 to 9%, which is less than a private sale is, which is usually 10%. So that is the recommendation. If there are other questions, I will try to answer them.
Just clarify, the sale will happen, it will be a marshal sale.
Right.
And that, speaking with our maritime attorney, suggested that there would be no commission due to the broker if the sale price did not reach the amount of our lien.
Right, and a marshal sale means it's more like an auction.
Okay.
Our broker is going to contact people that are interested in this
Find
kind of
buyers.
vessel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're ensured that, like you said, we're ensured that we'll recoup the money that we put into it.
No.
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 We're assured that the broker won't get paid unless we at least recoup some money. But to remind you, when we've had to remove 25, 30-foot vessels, it costs us $25,000. So if the worst happened and someone bought the boat for a few $100s, we'd be ahead of having the cost of removing this vessel. But we are, folks who are more familiar than I am with vessels of this size and condition have been guardedly optimistic that we should get back what we've expended on legal fees and dispose of this vessel that we don't want.
Are we required, for some reason, to have to do this as an auction-style sale, or why are we, I'm just wondering why we're doing it that way.
Because the vessel has been seized, and it's I'm not sure, I know this is.
We don't actually own the boat.
Right, thank you.
The boat's been arrested.
The boat has been arrested, yes.
By the marshal? The marshal arrested it?
Yes.
Who is the marshal?
Federal marshal.
It's a documented vessel, so it's actually, in some ways, a U.S. government relationship with the boat. If there were a war, heaven help us, they could use the spirit of Sacramento to protect us.
Is there a motion to direct staff to proceed with the marketed sale of this vessel?
Second?
Right, roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Terrabonne?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Right, moving on with item 16. Goals and objectives for 2016. So, may we have a staff report?
Thank you, President Mateusz. We've discussed this before, and so the staff report is a bit of a condensation of that discussion. First part, external factors. So the actions identified in LAFCO and the 2 civil grand jury reports were reviewed by the commission, and the majority of the items were fundamental operational improvements, allocating costs and revenues, quarterly financial reporting, and maybe considered a part of ongoing administrative improvement. I want to stress that establishing a list of goals and objectives cannot replace just simply completing all of the operational items necessary to run the Harbor District. And you've seen some of the effort that it takes to just simply do that in the presentations from staff earlier this evening. Major maintenance capital projects are included in the budget, and so by extension are identified and approved on a fiscal year basis beginning July the 1st. So establishing goals and objectives now will help inform the budget process as we move forward. But again, those major maintenance capital projects will come out of the budget process. And, as we talk about time frame there too, I'd like to say the goals and objectives should be realistically achievable in the time given. And again, that goes back to the fact that we've got operational needs going on throughout the year. And so the time available to devote to a list of goals and objectives is not staff working 40 hours a week. It's a portion of that, small portion of that, because we're running the district as well. I think it's also important to recognize that when establishing goals and objectives, there are opportunities that pop up. And just like a budget that can be amended, goals and objectives can be amended. And we wouldn't want to lose sight of an opportunity. We wouldn't necessarily want to chase an opportunity just because it exists. Ideally, it would fit in with a strategic plan that may wait for next year when we will hopefully have a strategic plan in place. So at the last meeting, there was in fact a total list of 62 action items. 37 of those were generated by either an early commission workshop, a civil grand jury, or LAFCO, and there was redundancy in those lists. Staff also provided a staff-generated list based on input received or observations made, and after the meeting of February 3rd, the list was amended to include safety and ADA review and circulation, trail, bike paths at Pillar Point. So the amended list of those district goals and objectives was sent to each commissioner to complete, and the staff report did say that the completed list would all be available on the website on Monday. I didn't get all 5 in time, so that did not occur. I do think it's important to note that if at the end of the process and the commission has prioritized projects, it should not be construed or implied that lower priority projects won't get done. Some projects are low-hanging fruit, can be easily accomplished with minimal effort. Some of the identified items were correctly identified by some commissioners as simple operational improvements that should be part of management's ongoing responsibilities anyway. Those will continue to happen. The one that comes to mind there is developing and improving morale of staff. I did feel it important at that time to put that on there so that it could be clearly identified as a priority. But I don't want to sound oppositional, but pretty much regardless of what the commission says, it's going to be a goal of staff to develop, it'll be a goal of your management to develop staff and improve morale. So I did receive back from all 5 commissioners worksheets, and Commissioner Bernardo, with his experience and work in communications, was the first one in with actually a very, very clear graphical view of how to look at the chart. And so what he did was he classified all low priority items with color red, the medium priority items with color orange, and the high priority items with the color green. So what I'm going to work through with you this evening on the screens is the individual commissioners' reports. I'm not quite sure how yet they're going to show up, so I may have to shrink them or scroll through them, but we'll see how that goes. So I'll work through in alphabetical order each commissioner's submittal. I then took the liberty of taking each commissioner's submittal, all formatted and filled out slightly differently, and translating them into Commissioner Bernardo's green, orange, and red format, so that we can see them side by side, all 5 commissioners, and without even looking, you can see where the priorities of the commission as a whole occur. I then took the further liberty of assigning a numerical value to each of those. I assigned 1 to low priority, I assigned 3 to medium priority, and I assigned 5 to a high priority items on all 5 commissioners. I then summed those so that we have a ranking. So for example, any one item would have a total maximum ranking of 5. It wouldn't necessarily, of 25. It wouldn't necessarily have a minimum ranking of 5 because appropriately so, not all items were ranked by all commissioners. So the fact that something was not ranked doesn't necessarily it certainly affects whether it would score high. Doesn't necessarily mean that a score of 5 is the lowest possible score that anything could get. So once I had done that, I then sorted the list from highest to lowest, so that we can see in a snapshot what those items were that scored highest by the body, the Harbor Commission as a whole. So having thus explained what it is we're going to be looking at, Melanie, if you can turn on the screen, we'll start going through the different worksheets.
I believe we may need to extend our meeting to 10:30.
We've got 10:10. If you'd like to make a motion to do that.
So moved. Second?
I'll second.
You want to do this by acclamation, or would you prefer a roll call?
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Terrabonne?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Okay. So what we see here, and I can see now, yeah, okay. How easy is it for the public and other staff to read any of that up on the screens?
Fine.
Impossible.
Impossible, okay.
Can we move around and maybe throw it
Yes.
around?
I can see it here,
Do
perfect.
they not have screens at their podium?
We
Do you-
have screens right here.
Do you have screens at your
Yes,
podium?
Yeah,
I
actually-
can see mine perfectly.
Okay.
so-
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so now I've
But
blown it
that, my
up.
point was that the public,
Right, no, and that was my question too.
But
So
he
what I've done
increased
is
the
I've blown
font
it up.
size, so,
I can see it fine. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So what I've done is I've just sort of expanded this so that we can get an idea. And the first one up, as I said, in alphabetical order, is how Commissioner Bernardo worked through the process.
I like
And
colors.
you can see how his color ranking really makes it clear and easy. And these items are all in the order listed in the district goals and objectives. This is not including LAFCO civil grand jury items. This is just the other ones from the last discussion. So, okay, I'm going to see how, okay, I got to do it like this. So we can see where Commissioner Bernardo placed his priorities. I'll highlight the high priority ones for the benefit of the record. Stabilize staffing and improve morale was high, as was separating budget into enterprise and general funds, refinance or paying off the DBW loan, completing the strategic plan. Those were Commissioner Bernardo's high priority items. The low priority items, budgeted projects, fee structure and review, leases review, OpenGov, let's see, OPM study session, Phillip Point study session, the policy items on social media, communications, and RFPs for financial advisor and bond counsel. So that gives you an idea. Now, I'll move on to...
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is really hard to look at like this. Are these documents going to be attached to the board packet as they should have been for transparency purposes?
Well, as I had said on the, in the staff report, I believed that I was going to be able to have all of these on the website and as part of the board package, or at least on the website by Monday, but I didn't receive all commissioner submittals by that time.
Can they get added?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So now I'm going to have to shrink it back down a little. This is Commissioner Brennan, who, with the goal of grouped the items together, put a lot of effort into this and grouped the items together. So grouped a number of the items under governance, transparency, communication, marketing, and public outreach, as we can see. And then, as we can see here, listed several of those as being of highest priority.
Well, actually, You would have to show the notes to really
Okay.
clarify what I was doing there.
Okay. So,
I mean, we can't look at it like this. This doesn't make
okay,
any
well,
sense.
Commissioner, if I had, again, if I had received all of them in time, they would have been up on the website. I don't know how else to do this. This particular spreadsheet is quite large. Let's see, if I shrink it down, and then read through some of this, does that help?
Well, I have it all printed out right here, so if you would like me to read through it, I'm happy to do that.
We can do that if that's the wish of the commission, or do you want to sort of précis it, condense it a little and move forward?
I think it's fine like this.
Okay,
I think that, you know, I don't know if members of the public can.
I'll wait until it's my time to speak, and then
Okay,
I'll go
that'd be
over
great.
it.
Yeah, I think we
That'd be
should go
perfect.
through
Thank
all
you.
of them
Okay.
first, and then go back to the individual commissioners.
so thank you, Commissioner Brennan, for that. So what I'll do is I'll continue just discussing a little bit about how you organize. So you grouped under that category of governance, transparent communications, marketing, public outreach. You did a small grouping under the JPA, the Joint Powers Agreement with South City. You grouped under budget, CIP projects, leases, chart of accounts, new accounting software, and provided high priority on a lot of those items. You grouped a group of safety, and as I had asked in the submittal to you, to feel free to add items, and this is what you did in that. And you grouped strategic plan items. You can see the high priorities over here in this column here, paying off the DBW loan, the strategic plan, this 5-year CIP, and then daily operations. So then Commissioner Corrali talked about top priorities of fiscal responsibility and staffing stability, and went through, and we can see there, I'm going to increase this now.
So, Steve, just one correction that I think I skipped. I actually wanted to put on there that the lease review was also a high priority. I may have missed that when I was
Okay.
Xing my box, so I'm sorry. But if you
Okay.
wouldn't mind Xing that box, that would be great.
Okay.
And
I'll amend
implement-
that when I get to the compilation sheet as well.
Okay, because OpenGov just is already happening. That's why I didn't put anything
Right.
there.
And I think certainly that raises a very good point, that some of these items, as I said at the beginning, are happening anyway.
Right.
Right? OpenGov is happening anyway. And I don't think that however this gets ranked, it's not going to happen. It may affect when talking with our accounting department, if it's a matter of getting a budgeting document or a quarterly document done versus an OpenGov doc, the ranking will play a role there. I'm going to make a note to add leases. Okay.
I want to make it clear, that doesn't mean that I don't think OpenGov is
Understood.
important. Right, I just know that's happening.
Understood. Understood. So we can see here, Oyster Point Marina study session and the liaison committee ranking high, completing the strategic plan ranking high, board policies ranking high, and that's it. Here's a good comment, for example, transparency is a given and should be part of our core values, I think, is
Right.
a way of abbreviating that. Commissioner Matoush, appropriately talking about working well together and getting her done. High priorities there on staffing, on the budgeted projects, budget and fee structures, OpenGov, refinance paying off the DBW loan, Oyster Point Marina study session. You can see these ordinance review in general, completing the strategic plan, showing up again. a District of Distinction and the Transparency Certificate from the Special District Leadership Foundation, and Financial Advisor Bond Counsel for a refinance of the DBW loan if that was necessary. We've got Commissioner Paravano. The staffing morale is a high priority. South City and the JPA is a high priority. OPM and PPH, seaworthy and non-pays. This is, it could have been more explanatory on this. This is basically cleaning up our marinas, our anchorages, so that we've got basically a roster of tenants who are in operational boats that are seaworthy and are current on all their bills. Completing the strategic plan, again, showing up, as are the Special District Leadership Foundation, District of Distinction, and Transparency certificates. That's the 5 individual commissioners. So then if we take that all together, and now I'm going to shrink it down, and you can again see, before we even get into the detail, we can see where the commonalities are. Again, stabilizing staffing, improving morale. We got 4 greens up there, and I think, again, speaking to, oh gosh, sorry. Speaking to what Commissioner Crowley said about OpenGov, just because she didn't rank it doesn't mean it's not important. I would guess that Commissioner Brennan didn't rank stabilizing staffing and improving morale because fundamentally, as she said in her notes, this is a fundamental management responsibility and doesn't need to be established as a goal. It should be a core value, again, to use that phrase again. So we can see, again, we've got some differences of opinion and we've got some agreements. And we can see sort of how things spread out a little bit. But again, it's a little difficult to determine. I think the one that's important is the next spreadsheet, where again, I said I assign these arbitrary values to the 1, 3, and 5, to the low, medium, and high, and then sorted them by their aggregate score. So over here, I'm going to blow it up a little bit in this area. You can see budget and enterprise general funds got an aggregate score of 23 out of a maximum possible of 25. Completing the strategic plan, an aggregate score of 21 out of 25. And so it goes on down the list. And if I now zoom out, you can see how those have ranked, those have grouped, because this is the visual representation. Now zoom back in again and focus on the actual items themselves and the score. We've got budget again, the highest ranking of the district goals and objectives that were on that list, the strategic plan, stabilizing staffing, Oyster Point Liaison Committee, review and fee structure, Oyster Point again, transparency showing up quite highly with a total aggregate score of 16. Then we move into Pillar Point, property management, safety and ADA review, going back to the seaworthy and non-pays of the 2 harbors, District of Distinction, Financial Advisor Bond Counsel showing up with the same score. This group all have the same score of 13. Moving down into complete 2015-16 budgeted items. I'm going to move over here on this row and add a high to Commissioner Correale there.
Thank you.
And so what that does I'm not going to resort the spreadsheet right now, but that takes leases and review up to an aggregate score of 17, putting it just a hair above the SDLF transparency. Start getting down here, policies, Pillow Point Harbor, Outer Harbor, moorings and anchorage. That's actually, again, like the seaworthy and non-pays could have been received a little more exposition on my part. That's mostly to do with cleaning up policies and ordinances so that we can get to that seaworthy and non-pay issue. Then we get down into the social media policy, electronic communications policy. I think the social media policy is another one like OpenGov as well, by the way. We've received commission direction on this. We have received a proposal. We can get rolling on that with comparatively little effort, but it will take some staff time to implement and then staff time to manage. So this speaks again to that idea of the low-hanging fruit, regardless of the score. Then I did say generally, and the reason I provided extra rows in the sheet was for commissioners to feel free to add items to the list. And as you can see here, this second block is Commissioner Brennan, who added a number of items: educational signage, commission meeting space, successor agency for the West Trail, website, RFP for new auditor, electronic archiving of district documents, 5-year CIP, Pillow Point Harbor volleyball and playground at Perch Beach, Wi-Fi, water quality, and I think under public safety it was Pillow Point Harbor docks and Romeo Pier. Now obviously those only scored 5 because no other commissioners were aware of those. So this is a work in progress, and I would now, that concludes the presentation, so I'd turn it over to the commission to comment, to change scores, to add items, to get to the point where perhaps staff can have clear direction of how we should prioritize our time during the next year.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep this brief. I just want to explain kind of my approach on this. One, I wanted to make it graphically useful. That's why I added the color, because I thought visually it could really help the eye see which items were important to me, or the most important. And then two, the other piece, the most important piece for me was I realized that this was a huge laundry list. Okay, I mean, it's long, and I know it's going to get longer as we add more things to it, and that not everything can be high priority. I mean, the reality is when you're prioritizing, not everything can be, because otherwise we would just go crazy, I think. And at the same time, not everything is low priority either. There has to be some balance. So I really, if I had to really had a tough time whittling it down for me personally what they were. That's why I had the numbers that I had in terms of what was red, what was yellow, and what was green. I really tried to, for me, pick 3 or 4 for the high priority, and then all the rest to me were kind of low and mid. And as you said, Mr. McGrath, that a lot of this stuff you're already doing. Right. So, I mean, it's kind of part of the daily operations routine. So that's kind of, that was my approach. I just wanted to say that. And then also just thank you for putting it together so graphically like this. And I love the idea of the numbering system, because the ranking, because it's so clear. And it merges everyone's together. So I just thank you so much for this really well done putting together all this jumble into an easily understandable, cohesive chart. Thank you.
Commissioner Corrali.
And I want to echo Robert's sentiments. I think it's extremely clear, and thanks for the idea of color coding, because that really helps visually. But I just wanted to let everyone know my thoughts behind putting together the priorities. I try to look at themes, like fiscal responsibility and the HR needs / workforce development, and then the, like Oyster Point, strategic plan, all of those. So once I put the themes, once I got the themes out there, I kind of ranked, like, what was it that would fit under fiscal responsibility? So like, the enterprise enterprise, non-enterprise, budgeting, the fee structure and the lease. That's why I knew that the lease should have been on there, Steve, and I'm sorry again for not putting that on there. But I was looking at themes and workforce development, stabilizing staff morale, things like that. So just to give you the thinking behind, what I was going for, and then I was prioritizing the things under my themes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So does it make sense to say that we could say, please concentrate on 13s and above?
That's a
as
lot.
The first group of items for your direction?
I would say top 5.
Top 5.
Yeah, which is the budget, strategic plan, the stabilized staffing, which I think that's happening anyway. So, wait, you just moved up, Stephen. I don't know what's under fee structure. And actually now the lease piece is there too, right? 'Cause
Yeah, the lease would
review
move
is going to go up
up.
to right underneath the Oyster Point study session. I mean, that's a lot. But I mean, a quick question, Steve. So for the item that got 20 points, stabilize staffing and improve morale. I mean, that is ongoing. I think Sabrina brings up a good point. That is, that, if she didn't rank it, and if it's a core value, then that's
Right.
exactly right. But I'm not sure if that needs to be up there because it is ongoing. So do we look at transparency? Do we go down to 15 and do the study sessions and RFP property management and just take out the stabilized staffing because we know that's happening and that's going to continue to happen? In which case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go down to 14, or down to 15. Because SDLF transparency is also happening, right?
Well, I wouldn't.
Could be better?
It's, transparency is happening.
Right.
SDLF Transparency, Special District Leadership Foundation, is a very specific program that has very specific requirements in our website and our documents. And that will be a side effect of some of our improvements in our website and our communications in a way. I mean, we will, I think, get to the point, if we don't prioritize it, we will get to the point at some point where we'll look around and we'll say, oh, look, we qualify for this award.
But I view that as a core value.
From saying, here, staff, we'd like to see you focusing on the checklist necessary to achieve the award from the Special District Leadership Foundation.
Right, and so I viewed that as a core value, which is why I
Yes,
didn't rank it.
transparency, yes.
Right, and so I would suggest that we look at the top 5 X the stabilized staffing, because that's happening, and the SDLF, and that's a core value, and then the SDLF transparency, which is also a core value, and just cut it off under RFP for property management. But I'm only one voice, but I think that right there is a lot.
That's a lot.
So what, for the members of the public who can't read this, the ones that you've mentioned,
Would
Commissioner
be-
Corrali, are budget and enterprise general fund, strategic plan, stabilized staffing, core value, Oyster Point JPA liaison
And that's
committee.
happened, that's already happened,
And
right?
that's happening, fee structure review, Oyster Point study session, leases review, transparency, again, a core value, Pillow Point Harbor study session, and an RFP for property management.
Correct. Because that's a lot right there. But that would, if you were to take out the stable, the HR piece and the transparency piece, that would still be your top 5 priorities, right? Based on the rankings, because you have 3 17s and 2 15s, sorry. Do you see what I'm saying? So priority 1 would be the 23.1, which is the budget enterprise / general funds. Number 2 would be complete strategic plan. Number 3 would be the liaison committee, have that ongoing. Number 4 would be the fee structure review and the study session and the lease review. Number 4 would be the transparency. That's also a core value. And then you have the PPH study session and the RFP for property management.
I'd like to make a comment when it's my turn.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to monopolize it, but anyway, those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Brennan.
Well, I have a few different comments, but I'm going to start by just making one comment because I noticed we just got a public speaker slip that's really more of a point of information. I just feel like we're really getting into the weeds here, and I think the reason we hired the new general manager, Steve McGraw, is to manage the district. And while I believe that all of these things, plus more, are incredibly important to the future of the district, I think that it's not really my place to tell the staff exactly what order to put these in. I think, the staff, the management knows what they're trying to juggle, and obviously if it's a public safety issue, then that would come to the top of the list. I mean, we don't need to tell them how to do their job. I think all we need to do is say, look, here's a list, all these things are important. We know they're important because it's obvious, we've heard from the public, we've heard from the grand jury, we've heard from LAFCO and various other places, and let the staff do their job. So I feel like this exercise is, while it might be kind of fun, I really feel like I'm getting dragged into a level of management that really isn't about goals and objectives. It's about really specific scheduling of various tasks. And I would feel more comfortable letting the staff sort that out. But I think it's great that we all agree these are all important things that need to get done. I mean, that in itself seems beneficial. The list is also partial, and as Steve already pointed out, things are going to have to ebb and flow and move around in priority based on what fires we're trying to put out, what's urgent in the moment, and we need to allow for flexibility for the staff to make adjustments. So I just feel like we're kind of spinning our wheels here, and while I would like to continue to work on this document for my own sanity, to help organize my own thoughts on all these various things that the district needs to do, I do find that, I don't want to undermine the usefulness of that task. I just think it's more of a working document and it's direction, but I don't think we really need to get overly specific with the direction. I think that we've hired a good general manager, and I think that he knows what to do. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. I am definitely noticing things that are missing on here, like diversity and the board training that we were all supposed to receive. Some of us have gotten our training, some of us have not, with the California Special District Association. Public process. Are we going to continually bring in opportunities for the public to weigh in on what our priorities are as far as tasks go? There's so many things that we could be discussing here. The list we could easily add another 50 items. So I just, I'm kind of done with it. I mean, I'm going to keep working on this list for my own, personal interests of staying organized with what's important to me. But I'm happy to share it with the staff. But but I just, this feels kind of silly to me. I hate to say it. I mean, it kind of feels like we're doing some sort of a survey like you'd find in a magazine. And I really think that we need to let our management manage. So that's my thoughts.
Do you have something? I have something.
All right, Commissioner Corrali.
So I actually don't agree with those comments. I think that this document serves a few purposes. One is the general manager's performance review. This is a benchmarkable document for that. Two, it actually allows us to focus on goals. Having seen, some of the meetings that we've had, and at least, and I've watched some on the videos, it just seems like it's unfair to staff that we don't give clear direction sometimes, that the goals are not clear, and that things like distractions happen. But this gives us a document that allows us to keep focused, okay? And we have to keep focused because from what I understand, based on conversations I've had with members of the Board of Supervisors, we have a 12 to 18 month window to accomplish something. And that clock started ticking in July. So we have about a year left to accomplish something. And if we aren't focused, we'll accomplish nothing, and we won't have anything benchmarkable for the general manager. I mean, thank goodness we have Yvonne and Glenn who understand budgets well enough to give us even our mid-year budget review and things that are going to be refined right throughout the year. But if we don't have a focus and goals that we can pinpoint that we've achieved by the end of this year, I don't know what the Board of Supervisors is going to think. I don't know what the community is going to think, because I'm going to be honest with you. Having read that last grand jury report, again, once a grand juror, always a grand juror, it was pretty scathing. And these top priorities address those issues. And if we don't get those accomplished, then we have, we're doing the public a disservice because we haven't done our job. And quite frankly, there'd be total justification to dissolve this district, which I am not prepared to do. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the top 5 priorities down to cell 15 or DG 25, so that the staff knows that these are the board's goals and they can work accordingly based on those goals. So we've got, like I said, Glenn is working on the budget. That's going to be a work in progress. But as we see, even that, to get to a monthly update will probably take at least a fiscal year cycle, maybe 2, right? I don't know. So these things are being fixed, but if we get distracted by other issues that are not agreed upon by this commission, we're not going to accomplish the basic things that the grand jury and the LAFCO reports have outlined, and quite frankly, that the public deserves. The public deserves to understand how our budget looks versus, how our budget looks and how we classify enterprise versus non-enterprise activities. That's a big part of the grand jury's report about how our tax dollars are being spent. So my motion is to just make sure that we keep these 5 things on track so that we've got clear direction to staff. And quite frankly, Steve, again, this is going to be benchmarked against your performance for your review. And so that, I know, and so that we've got something to accomplish by the end of this calendar year. So that's my motion.
I have a comment.
So there's a motion and a second. Oh, a public comment, sorry.
Oh, yeah, we do have a public comment. So,
Could you withdraw the motion till after we have the public
No,
comment?
I'm not. Thank you. I
Dan
made the
Blick.
motion.
I just wanted to very briefly put in a plug for the district having a social media presence. And I think that there's so much good work that goes on in the district, at the harbors, and people don't know about it. And what people hear, the residents of San Mateo County, they read the newspapers and they get the bad news. And what they don't get is all the little good things that happen. And so engaging with social media really helps to engage the residents of San Mateo County, help people see what they're paying for. And there's just a lot of benefit, and we can hit the ground running. We are ready to go as soon as the switch is turned on. Thank you.
So to address that, I think that's a work in progress too, right? We're
Yes.
working on that. So
Yes,
that's not that it's
absolutely.
not important, it's just that
Right.
it's being worked on as we speak.
All right, we have a motion and second. Did you have another comment?
I do have a comment, yeah. So I wanted to just validate the staff. I think it's really important to mention that the district has gotten an amazing amount done in recent times. And I think it's really critical that we not downplay that. I mean, I can think of numerous things, and it's true that we have, you know, the wheels in motion on a number of projects that aren't complete yet. But I am just really impressed and inspired by what our staff is doing. I think it's a complete turnaround, and I'm very proud of the work that the district is doing. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I think we're moving in a really positive direction. So I just want to make that comment, and I do want to talk about some of my comments here in my spreadsheet, since other people have had a chance to talk about theirs. So I'll be happy to send this document out to the rest of the board too, so you can see it. It's unfortunate we didn't all get to read each other's in advance of the meeting, because it might have been helpful. But anyway, I added a few things, which are sort of things we've heard of before, but a few are new ideas. I want to come back to the commission meeting space. When we signed our lease with our meeting space over in El Granada on the coast side, we made an arrangement with building owner, and in the lease, we made a deal essentially, which committed the building owner to build out half of our office space into a public meeting space. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened because we have a backlog of, I don't know, 50, 100 boxes, 200 boxes worth of archival documents that desperately need to be scanned, and they're a fire hazard. So we haven't been able to use that space. It's really just a storage space, and we're, you know, for the amount of rent we pay per square foot, it's really underutilized. So I think it's sad that we haven't gotten to that yet, so I wanted to reemphasize that. But to try to scan and archive all those documents is a monumental task, and we've been sidelined with a hellacious PRA request, so that's kind of delayed things further with that project. But I think that clearing out that space so that we can have a meeting space of our own it would really help move the district forward. We are paying for it. Also, I'd like to mention that there is, you know, a movement with the website. I think that that's something that's really going to be advantageous for the district, to have a functional website that's easy for people to use. That also dovetails in with social media, which the district has never had. And one of our shortfalls here is that our public outreach has not been good. By having poor public outreach, we have let ourselves, or we've opened ourselves up to more negative press than we probably deserved. In some cases, we have deserved it. But I think if we were getting the good word out about what our tenants are doing, what our fishermen are doing, the various great, fun recreational opportunities at both Pillar Point Harbor and Oyster Point, we'd be doing ourselves a favor, and I think we would make the residents of the county proud to have a harbor district and to have the two facilities. So I do think social media is really critical for the future of the district and to get the positive word out about the district. Also, Perched Beach is a place that's been incredibly underutilized and been a major point of contention in the community. It's time we do something productive with that space in addition to the kayak facility that's there now, which of course I support. We have opportunities to potentially have a playground there, maybe volleyball nets. It would bring us a lot of goodwill from San Mateo County residents if we were offering more recreational opportunities to visitors. And those are two things that I think the residents of this county would really use and appreciate. So,
Commissioner Brennan, if I can interrupt for just a moment, we need a motion to extend the meeting until 11 o'clock.
I move that we extend the meeting to 11 o'clock.
Second.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Then I'm almost done, by the way.
Is there a second?
Shall we adjourn?
I think you better wrap it up. You got about a minute.
So the last thing that I have on my list, well, one of the last things is educational signage. We have obviously water quality issues. We also have marine mammal protection issues, and we don't have signage, which helps our visitors better understand.
We need to vote by 10:30 if there's a motion on the floor.
Well, the motion's failed for lack of a second.
The motion to extend.
No,
your
to
motion
extend
to.
your motion.
Oh, my motion, yes.
The one that I seconded.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That one needs a vote by 10:30.
Okay, it's 10:29 right now. We don't have time for any more comments to finish up, so roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan? Aye. Commissioner Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Paramano?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
We can make a motion to we adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.